Chapter 1002. String theory was a branch of non-traditional theoretical physics that was born in the mid to late 20th century. The biggest difference from traditional physics was that its core idea was that the basic units of nature were not point-like particles such as electrons, photons, neutrinos, and quarks, but very, very small linear strings, including open strings with ends and closed strings or closed strings with loops. The different vibrations and movements of strings produced different basic particles, and energy and matter could be transformed. It was this theory that gave birth to the so-called high-dimensional universe concept. For the first time, humans on Earth began to realize that the universe they were in was not as simple as it looked. It was an extremely complex celestial body, so complex that the truth might not be discovered even after the extinction of mankind. Time, space, soul, and so on, which were regarded as the ultimate power by many people, were just insignificant dust in a vast and boundless universe. With the help of an unknown device, Zhang Cheng and Old Chun directly tore through the three-dimensional universe and entered a wonderful space that was completely indescribable with words. No, perhaps it could not be called a space, because it was not like a normal space, which had length, width, and height, but was somewhat similar to a two-dimensional space, where everything was flat. Especially staying in the black vortex, there were countless huge fleets and all kinds of huge war machines. It was simply more amazing than any sci-fi movie or game created by mankind. After passing through the long and narrow platform passage, the two quickly came one after another to a circular conference room. Inside stood 64 men and women who looked surprisingly similar. That's right, men and women, and nearly a third of them were women. After all, according to the probability of biological genetics, when humans gave birth to offspring, half of them would be male and the other half would be female. Therefore, it was not surprising that there were some women. Looking at the opposite sex who looked very similar to himself, Zhang Cheng's heart was filled with a sense of absurdity. Among them, a scantily dressed girl even threw him a flirtatious look. However, Old Chen obviously did not care about this. He went straight to a man who looked to be about 30 years old and exuded a superior aura from head to toe. He placed one hand on his chest and slightly bowed. Initiator, he has passed the trial and officially joined us as a member of the organization. Very good. On behalf of the organization, I welcome you to join us. The man called Initiator smiled and nodded. Thank you. As he was not familiar with everything around him, Zhang Cheng was very cautious. He did not say too much nonsense and also responded with a smile. The two of them looked at each other for about 10 seconds, and the initiator immediately stopped probing. He pointed to the only empty seat not far away and said, "That seat belongs to you. Go and sit down. Next, we will start a meeting to redivide the area and formulate a new battle plan." After Zhang Cheng sat down, the initiator raised his hand. In an instant, a vast and boundless star chart appeared in the conference room out of thin air. Different from the simple, three-dimensional starry sky in ordinary sci-fi movies, this star map had silver strings at every certain distance, completely separating the star clusters from each other. The distance between each string and the string was divided by a series of numbers. It generally looked like a cake that was cut into pieces layer by layer. The initiator undoubtedly sensed the curiosity in Zhang Cheng's eyes and took the initiative to explain. As you can see, this is not an ordinary star map, but a superstring star map. The area isolated by each string you see is equivalent to the entire universe observed by the primitive Earth. It is hundreds of millions of times larger. The so-called superstring war is to seize control of the strings through a series of methods, enter the other party's area, and then start a war to obtain power, technology, knowledge, and resources. What are the strings you are referring to? Zhang Cheng asked with a frown. Strings are a very complicated thing. You can understand it as a physical phenomenon produced by super energy vibrations. According to the organization's current situation, there are a total of 182 strings in the entire universe. Almost all matter is produced from their vibrations, and magic energy is one of them. Moreover, we have already grasped 20 of them. The initiator's tone had a hint of pride. However, he did have the right to be proud. As someone who had started from nothing in the three-dimensional universe and built up this huge organization bit by bit and became the supreme leader, no matter how one looked at it, it was a miracle that could not be replicated. In particular, sharing rights, knowledge, technology, and power with the members of the organization was not something that just anyone could have such breadth of mind and boldness, even if the ones recruited were themselves from the parallel universe. Thinking of this, Zhang Cheng nodded his head thoughtfully. I understand. Please continue. With the 20 strings as the core, the area from D4357 to F8231 is the area under our control. Right now, our main force is attacking C1240. There's a planet that is very difficult to deal with here, temporarily named Darkness. It is very, very special. Its diameter is about 30,000 times that of Earth, and it is independent of all galaxies. In other words, there are no stars around it, but it has given birth to an extremely special civilization system. A group of humanoid species called the Harlesians mined special energy crystals from the depths of the planet's core and used them as a foundation to create highly prosperous and developed cities one after another. To put it simply, they used the power of these crystals to create weapons that could pose a great threat to us and completely annihilate the first expeditionary army. Because of this, the organization decided to recruit masters of energy, mysticism, and alchemy to deal with these loathsome guys. How about it? I'll give this planet to you. Can you deal with it for the organization? The initiator gave a concise introduction of the situation, then looked at Zhang Cheng with eyes full of expectation. The Great Flux War was not the scene in the minds of ordinary people where battleships filled the sky and covered the sun, nor was it a crazy battle where a sea of insects drowned the enemy. On the contrary, the closer the strings were to the galaxies, the easier it was to give birth to highly developed civilizations or unimaginably powerful life forms. Therefore, every attack was a risk to one's life, because you would never know how much terrifying energy and destructive power was hidden in those seemingly ordinary life forms. Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and stretched out a finger to browse through the information on this dark planet. Most of it was images left behind from the previous expeditionary army's battle and destruction. After about 20 minutes of silence, he rubbed his chin and replied, "No problem, leave it to me." Chapter 1003. As a newcomer who was participating in the war conference for the first time, after Zhang Cheng accepted the mission of conquering the Dark Planet, he no longer paid any attention to the grand strategies that were too complicated for him, as well as the vast amount of jargon that he did not understand. He sat silently in his seat and continued to browse through the information in the database, especially the part about strings. Just as the initiator had mentioned earlier, strings were something that could not be described with words. To be precise, no words could describe its incredible power. To put it simply, a single main string could provide endless energy for the expeditionary army. Even if all the fleets and cannon fodder that numbered in the hundreds of millions were wiped out, as long as the main string was still in their hands, they would be able to create an interstellar fleet that was larger than the size of a pen within a few days at most by relying on the current technology. Limitless. No limit. Never weakening. The super energy oscillation phenomenon produced by the main string was like an inexhaustible gold mine. Most importantly, only through it could one enter the high-dimensional universe from the low-dimensional universe and break free from the shackles of time and space. From the moment they entered, they would obtain the same abilities as the life forms in the area. For example, some life forms in the high-dimensional universe were not restricted by space at all and could freely jump between different spaces. Another example was that some life forms in the high-dimensional universe were not restricted by time and could freely travel between the past and the future in parallel universes. To the humans in the three-dimensional universe, such terrifying abilities were as hard to resist as gods. However, as long as they controlled a single main string that was connected to the universe, They could enter this area through it, and the entire expeditionary army would obtain the same power. They could then launch a destructive attack and conquer one planet after another. Other than that, there were also a large number of tiny strings in the multivariate universe. The most common ones were the strings that separated the smallest points in time and parallel universes. They were the strings that connected the past, present, and future, as well as the endless possibilities of the entire universe. It was very clear that the few fantasy worlds that Zhang Cheng had been to in the past actually existed in some corner of the universe, and it was very likely that they were under the jurisdiction of the organization. However, as an organization that was so powerful that it occupied close to 1/9 of the universe, no one would care about 1 or 2 planets. Judging from the past plans and battles, at most, they would clean up the planets with life forms in the areas around the main string. As for the rest, they could not be bothered with them at all. Just as he was concentrating and trying to understand those complicated scientific theories and strange intelligent species, Old Chin suddenly came up to him, knocked on the table hard, and asked, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" He's actually so engrossed. "No, nothing. I'm just a little shocked by the true form of strings and the universe." Zhang Cheng stopped flipping through the information and looked up with a smile. Relax, don't be so nervous. Everyone here is similar to you when they first arrived, but they will slowly understand and familiarize themselves with it after some time. All right, don't think too much about it now. We plan to hold a welcome party for you before we depart. Old Chun waved his hands excitedly. Not only him, but there were also a few young members around him. They all looked interested, as if they were looking forward to the so-called welcome party. Regrettably, Zhang Cheng didn't even hesitate before rejecting the offer. "I'm sorry. I'm not in the mood to participate in any entertainment activities for the time being. At the very least, I won't waste even a second of my time before I get rid of the dark planet, let alone something as boring as a party." After saying that, he ignored the surprised and curious gazes of the people around him, turned around, and disappeared at the end of the dark and deep corridor. "Wow, another cool type?" The woman who had winked at Zhang Cheng not long ago raised her eyebrows. "Damn it, I thought that a handsome guy had finally arrived and could ease my loneliness a little. Who would have thought that he was such an unromantic guy? That's right, I haven't been in love for 6 billion years. For a woman, this is the cruelest torture in the universe." The other 2 women also joined in the condemnation. For a moment, the meeting room was filled with chatter, as if 1,500 ducks had gathered together to quack. Ahem! Old Chin couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed twice and reminded them, "Ladies, please remember, we are all ourselves in countless parallel universes. There's some kind of microsecond connection between us. Are you really so thirsty that you want to make a move on your other self? Oof, don't give me that. Hurry up and tell us, what's up with that newcomer? I keep feeling that he's constantly emitting a dangerous aura." The woman who spoke first rolled her eyes and asked in a low voice, "He is indeed very dangerous. He's much more dangerous than the majority of us. In the process of the trial, he destroyed at least 3 planets, one of which was his own home planet, Earth. Think about it. Who among us would be crazy enough to let go of their own home planet? Who would treat their own kind as ants again and again, bringing them despair and destruction? Therefore, I suggest that you don't provoke him. Even I can't see through what he's thinking in his mind and what kind of shocking move he will make next." When he said this, Old Chin's tone was full of warning. Genius? Madman? Devil? Even he himself didn't know how to describe Zhang Cheng's performance throughout the trial, especially when he was faced with danger. His choice was completely different from a normal person's. It was no different from driving a car around a corner and not letting go of the accelerator pedal. However, Zhang Cheng's every turn so far was perfect and elegant. Therefore, people couldn't figure out whether it was luck or the result of careful planning in his mind. This guy destroyed Earth and all the humans on it? A woman's expression changed slightly when she heard the news. Although most of the members had their hands stained with the blood of innocence, and some had even led their subordinates to destroy one star system after another, That was only after they had passed the trial and joined the organization. Before that, most of them had some special feelings for their home planet. Some would even occasionally go back as ordinary people to take a look, hoping to keep this beautiful memory forever. Old Chin nodded with a serious expression. Yes, no scruples, no hesitation. As long as he feels that it's beneficial to him, he'll do it without hesitation. Don't be fooled by his harmless appearance right now. I can guarantee that if any of you provoke him, when the time is right in the future, he'll definitely not be stingy and double the revenge. Oh, right, a guy who failed the trial once threatened him and ended up in a miserable state. If you're interested, you can watch it through the Great String Observer. Chapter 1004. After getting rid of the meaningless social engagements, Zhang Cheng quickly got into his role and took over a well-equipped expeditionary fleet from the organization, including 20 billion ground combat units, 5,000 large planet destroyers, 20,000 medium-sized planet destroyers, 100,000 small outer space combat ships, 3 super space carriers, and 300,000 supply ships and transport ships. There was no lack of terrifying weapons that could destroy planets and even stars with one strike. It could be said that just this fleet composed entirely of advanced technology was enough to sweep across the universe where Earth was located and beat the alien black technology that humans once regarded as unattainable. But the problem was that such an expeditionary force armed to the teeth was defeated by a group of Harlesians who didn't even know what the universe was. They used a mysterious weapon called Harleson's Eye to disintegrate all invaders into particles that could not be distinguished by the naked eye in an instant. Almost all energy and material weapons were as fragile and laughable as newborn babies in front of Harleson's Eye. If the commander had not reacted quickly enough and escaped with the help of the nearby main string, there would probably be an empty seat in the conference room now. Perhaps this was the interesting part of the high-dimensional universe. You never knew how powerful and incomprehensible the enemy you would encounter on the next planet. However, Zhang Cheng did not intend to use this expeditionary force too early. Instead, he used the infinite energy near the main string to build a portal to hell. In less than a few minutes, the demon army, which had been waiting for a long time, appeared inside the space carrier that could accommodate hundreds of millions of lives through space folding technology. Where is this place? Rin, the succubus queen, looked around at the sci-fi walls and sky with strong curiosity in her eyes. This is a space carrier. You are at the entrance of another higher dimensional universe. Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and looked at these cannon fodder whose combat power could almost be described as trash as he explained expressionlessly. That's right. The Burning Legion and Hell Demons that had attacked cities and seized territories in the three-dimensional universe and destroyed countless planets were basically trash in front of the terrifying military strength of the organization, especially the main cannon on the space carrier. One shot could send a guy like the Dark Titan Sargeras to the Titan Pantheon to meet his old friend. Great Master of Darkness, your wisdom and strength make the lowly me feel amazed. Please allow me to offer you my utmost respect and loyalty. The First Lord of Nazresm, the leader of the Dreadlords, Barum, was as good as always at seizing the opportunity to suck up to others. Despite his cunning nature, he knew very well that this kind of advanced technology, which was the complete opposite of magic, was definitely not something his master was good at. However, he was smart enough not to point it out. Master, are you summoning us to start a war? Doomsday Overlord Polak asked cautiously. War? Yes, I'm ready to start a war. But before that, I need the Fear Fiend King's ability to infiltrate the enemy's base and figure out what exactly is going on with their technology. Especially one called Harleson's Eye. Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide anything and directly explained the situation. Although he had always believed that violence, killing, and destruction were the best way to end problems, he didn't mind playing tricks when he didn't have enough violence in his hands. After all, this was what he was good at. You mean infiltrate, disguise, instigate, and let those stupid enemies kill each other? Barum's eyes flickered with a frightening red light, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing shark-like sharp teeth. For the fear-fiend king, this set of actions to disintegrate and destroy the enemy from the inside was a walk in the park. Almost every time the Burning Legion went on an expedition, they were the irreplaceable vanguard. Zhang Qing nodded lightly. That's right. But this time, it's different from all the enemies you've encountered before. They call themselves the Harlson. They have dark skin, and their appearance is very similar to elves. Their individual strength is very strong, even comparable to the majority of the Lords of the Abyss. Most importantly, this planet called Darkness produces a kind of energy crystal. With this energy crystal, each of them can release unimaginably terrifying magic. If there are too many of them, even my life will be in danger. Understood. Rest assured, Nazresm will infiltrate this planet and bring back the secrets of the Harlson for you. Barum bowed deeply. Very good. I'll send a fleet to create some death and chaos, giving you a chance to sneak in. Now, take action. I don't like to wait for a long time. With that, Zhang Cheng gave a look to a clone adjutant behind him. The latter understood and immediately ordered 1/10 of the warships and land combat units to charge toward the Darkness planet in a suicidal manner and launch a carpet attack. At the same time, a transport landing ship full of fear-fiend kings silently landed on the ruins not far from the battlefield. Just as Zhang Cheng was observing the destruction caused by the fleet through the three-dimensional detector, a bright spot suddenly appeared on the pitch-black surface of the planet. The next second, all the warships involved in the attack seemed to be torn apart by some powerful force. In the blink of an eye, they began to shatter until they became tiny particles that could not be seen with the naked eye. There were no beautiful explosions. There were no deafening noises. But it felt even more sinister and terrifying. The unknown was the most chilling thing. Zhang Cheng could even detect subtle energy fluctuations from the bright spot that flashed by just now. It was different from the sphere of destruction that Old Chun had created. It was closer to the understanding and application of strings. No wonder the organization spent millions of years to recruit and cultivate a master of energy, mysticism, and alchemy just to deal with a mere planet. Because the weapons invented by the Harlson people were not so much a product of technology, but closer to mysticism and magic. Interesting. It seems that as long as I conquer this planet, I'll be able to thoroughly understand what strings are and how to use its endless energy. Muttering to himself that only he could hear, Zhang Chen crossed his arms and sat in his seat, patiently waiting for the fear-fiend kings to take action. Because he had already broken free from the constraints of time and space, he did not need to care about how many years, decades, centuries, or millennia this plan would waste. He only wanted one thing, and that was the final result that satisfied him. Chapter 1005. Irenifas was what the Harlesians called the planet under their feet. It was the land of eternal darkness. Just as its name suggested, this place was far away from all the stars. In addition, the atmosphere contained a type of energy called homophobic energy, causing the sky to be like a closed iron curtain, isolating the entire planet from the outside world. From the moment they were born, the Harlesians born here were filled with legends. According to human aesthetics, the men were handsome and fit, and the women were beautiful and alluring. Other than their shiny black skin, there was almost no flaw in their bodies. Most importantly, they were too close to the main string, so they evolved a unique physique that could extract energy from the crystals inside the planet for their own use. After billions of years of catalysis, the entire interior of the planet was almost a huge energy crystal, far more dangerous than any star. If some powerful weapons were used to directly destroy it, who knew what would happen, and whether it would cause irreparable damage to the main string? It was because of this reason that the organization chose the most time-consuming landing operation, hoping to occupy this planet instead of simply destroying it. Following the bombardment of the interstellar fleet, as well as the countless large-scale landings, the originally quiet surface ushered in a terrifying war. These wearers used unknown leather jackets to fix the gray crystals on the surface of their bodies. In small groups of 3 to 5, They constantly released energy blasts comparable to a million-ton nuclear warhead. Every time they did so, it would cause considerable casualties, especially without the support of the mothership's protective shield. A total of 2 billion soldiers were like ants moving an army of cannon fodder, and they were wiped out in less than 10 hours. There were no corpses or injuries left behind. Only high-energy particles filled the air, flashing with strange light spots. Oomph. Stupid invaders. They're like the ugly fish in the underground river. Just by looking at their numbers, they don't pose much of a threat, a man said with disdain as he stroked his long black and purple hair. Don't be careless. I have a bad feeling. The invaders this time seem to be fewer than last time, and they don't look like they're here to fight. Instead, they look like they're here to die, a woman next to him warned with a frown. Just as the man was about to open his mouth to say something, a huge black shadow suddenly descended from the sky, turning into a black shadow that directly entered his nose. In the next second, he knelt on the ground with a plop, his eyes flashing with a strange red light. The muscles on his face alternated between pain and pleasure, as if he had contracted some terrible disease. However, before the other members of the team could react to what had happened, the man twitched twice and fainted completely. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" The woman quickly squatted down and patted his face in panic. It had to be known that because of their physique, the people of Harlson never fell sick, nor did they age or die. Unless they were killed, even if their limbs were broken, they could be repaired through mysterious spells. "We must bring him back as soon as possible. Let's go. There are no more enemies here," the leader instructed with a solemn expression. Soon, the team took the unconscious guy and ran at an extremely fast speed on the pitch-black ground. After a while, they entered an entrance leading to the underground. They did not notice at all that the injured person who had fallen unconscious on the ground had secretly opened his eyes and was carefully observing his surroundings. In fact, at this moment, there was not only one team that had suddenly fainted, but hundreds of them. Some teams even had more than 2 members who had fainted. It was obvious that these pitiful fellows had been taken over by the Fear Fiend King and were no longer the same people. After all, their physique and strength were incomparably strong, but it did not mean that their souls were equally strong. On the contrary, due to being isolated from the outside world for a long time, most of the people of Harlson had an arrogant attitude. They felt that they were the supreme rulers of this planet, and that nothing could compete with their invincible selves. In addition, the expeditionary army had been easily wiped out, which encouraged their arrogance. In the end, they encountered the Fear Fiend King who liked to play tricks and fell for it. More than half of them broke down under the terrifying mental torture, their souls devoured, and their bodies replaced by the Fear Fiend King. There were also those with strong wills who were forcibly suppressed without exception, losing control of their bodies. As the first Lord of Nazresm, Balaam had taken over the body of a male Harlson and was rapidly digesting the remaining language, knowledge, habits, and interpersonal information in the other party's mind. When he arrived at an underground city with a towering energy crystal, he had already opened his eyes and pretended not to know anything. "What's going on? What happened? Why are we back?" "You're awake." The leader widened his eyes in shock. "Yes. Tell me what's going on." Balaam pretended to be innocent and blinked his eyes. "You suddenly fainted on the battlefield and scared us." Another team member took the initiative to explain. "Fainted? Damn it. Why don't I remember?" Balaam continued to display his innate acting and deceit abilities, sitting on the ground with furrowed brows. In contrast, the leader was very happy to see his unconscious team member wake up. He smiled and comforted him. "Relax. Perhaps the invaders used some attack method that we don't understand. It's best to get the elders to check on you now." "No need. I feel very good now." Balaam immediately shook his head and refused without hesitation. Through devouring souls, he already knew that the elders of Harlson had unimaginable power. He was afraid of giving himself away or letting the other party discover the secret of his soul. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Also, if you don't mind, I want to go home early and eat something." "Sure. Leave the mission report to me." then see you in 10 light hours. Goodbye." It had to be said that the Fear Fiend King was indeed a master of disguise and deceit. Hundreds of them had infiltrated Harlson society, and none of them were exposed. They all blended in peacefully, not even raising the slightest bit of vigilance from the enemy. However, for the sake of their future plans, these people didn't immediately take action. Instead, they lived orderly lives like the Harlson people, patiently waiting for the opportunity. Chapter 1006. While the Dreadlords were hiding in the dark to observe this strange planet and its strange inhabitants, two guests came to Zhang Cheng's spaceship. One of them was Old Chun, who he was familiar with, and the other was a woman who looked cold. Staring at the two of them, he asked expressionlessly, "What's the matter?" "Of course. I heard that you used 1/10 of your expeditionary force in exchange for a few hundred weak spies to infiltrate the Harlesian society," the woman asked in an unfriendly tone. "That's right. But the Dreadlords under me aren't just spies. They're the most outstanding scheming masters, enough to topple a seemingly powerful country or organization from the inside. The reason why your previous attack failed was because you relied too much on violence and saw it as the truth to conquer the universe. Of course, from a certain point of view, I also agree with the importance of violence. But when there isn't enough violence, I will adopt another strategy," Zhang Cheng explained calmly. However, the woman clearly didn't think so and retorted with a sneer, "Do you understand the social structure of the Harlesians? Do you know how their power, and resources are distributed? No, you don't understand. So your laughable plan is doomed to failure. Don't waste time. Newcomer, you still don't understand what a real Great Flux War is." "Hey, you're going a bit overboard," Old Chun, who was standing on the side, reminded him. "Overboard?" The woman turned around and stared at him with her reptilian eyes. "Do you know how much time it takes to create an expeditionary fleet? But this guy, he didn't even think about it and used 1/10 of his power as a cover to bury it." "Shut up. Remember, that was the decision of the initiator. If you have any grievances, go find him. Don't act all high and mighty in front of Newcomer," Old Chin reprimanded without showing any weakness. It wasn't hard to see from their tit-for-tat attitude that their relationship wasn't good, and it definitely wasn't the first time they had quarreled. "Oomph. Looks like you're on the Newcomer side this time, aren't you? Let's wait and see what kind of effect this so-called thief plan can have." After saying that, the woman turned around and went into the space-time connector, using the power of the main string to return to the headquarters. Looking at the unstable energy overflowing from the crack, Old Chun sighed helplessly and explained, "That woman just now is in charge of technology development and logistics. Almost all the expeditionary fleets, cloned soldiers, weapons, and equipment were created by her. In addition, almost every expedition would result in a large amount of exhaustion, causing her to be somewhat irritable. But don't worry, under normal circumstances, she will at most complain and throw a tantrum. She won't complain to the initiators. So she came here today to demonstrate. He thinks that I'm a newcomer who just joined the organization and looks like I'm easy to bully." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "Damn it. Promise me, don't go crazy. Otherwise, you'll be besieged." Old Chun gritted his teeth and warned. Perhaps if it were someone else in the organization, he would regard it as a form of verbal venting, but this guy in front of him was definitely not just venting. "Relax. I'm not that stupid. But since someone took the initiative to provoke me, I'll have to respond accordingly. I believe that after my plan conquers the dark planets, I'll give that woman a good slap in the face during the regular meeting. It'll be very exciting, won't it?" Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly as a meaningful smile appeared on his face. It should be known that he was not the kind of person who would swallow his anger, especially a second-string member in charge of logistics. That's right, a second-string member. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, people like this who were involved in scientific research and logistics were basically the irreplaceable core of a country or organization. But regrettably, in the Superstring War, their greatest use was not to invent anything new, but to effectively integrate all the technology in the conquered areas. That was all. This also meant that the traditional concept of focusing on research and innovation did not work here at all. It was not even as fast as plundering the technology of other civilizations. On the contrary, those first-string combat members each had unimaginable power. When necessary, they could easily destroy a star system. They were the irreplaceable main force. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng, who had the power of a stellar-level titan, was such an offensive main force. Even though he did not quite understand why the other party had suddenly come looking for him, he would not turn a blind eye to this kind of provocation. He had to give a strong response. Sai, do as you wish. One last reminder, your plan better not fail, or else. Old Chen purposely dragged out his words. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. Got it. The word fail doesn't exist in my dictionary, Zhang Cheng promised resolutely. He was not an idiot. He understood that this mission was essentially similar to a trial. It was a test of his own ability and vision. If he succeeded, then naturally everything would be fine. He might even be assigned to a certain area and be solely responsible for conquering a certain area and expanding the organization's sphere of influence. But if he failed, there was an 80% chance that he would not be able to obtain any major power for a long time. He might even be marginalized and completely reduced to a consultant role. After all, within the organization, being an authority not only meant controlling a large fleet and resources, but it also meant that he could build his own base with a certain main string as the center. I hope so. I have great expectations for you. After saying this, Old Chen also got into the space-time connector and left the mothership to return to headquarters. After the two had disappeared for more than half an hour, Zhang Cheng, who was sitting in a chair, muttered to himself with a faint smile, "Interesting, an organization that seems to be united but is full of fierce competition. It seems that the main string is an irresistible temptation for every member. In that case, I'll show a little of my ability." As soon as his voice fell, he turned around and said to Doomsday Lord Pollock, who was standing behind him without saying a word, "Go. Inform all the demons in the Legion that it's time to start a hunt and let all the demons begin to evolve in a stronger direction." Hunt? You mean? Pollock's eyes flashed with green flames that symbolized evil energy. "I believe you have seen how powerful the Harlesians are. Devour them, or be killed by them. This is the opportunity one gave to the new Burning Legion. You're too weak. If you don't want to become cannon fodder, fight to the death. As you wish. Supreme Master." Chapter 1007. Plunder, Devour, Evolve. To demons, as long as they could make themselves stronger, things like bloodline and race were not important. Soon, under Zhang Qing's arrangement, the powerful lords quietly landed on the surface of the dark planet through landing ships. They formed hunting teams and began crazily attacking the Harlesian civilians. In less than half a month, at least 2,000 Harlesians had been killed, and more than half of them were civilians. Of course, the demon lords were not much better. Nearly half of them died on the spot in the other party's revenge, and many suffered irreversible injuries. In the end, they were killed by their own people to prevent them from leaking information that should not be leaked. But at the same time, the harvest was quite rich. Through cruel and bloody dissection, as well as the use of magic and genetic technology, a small number of demon lords finally began to absorb and control the energy stored in the crystals like the Harlesians. In addition, there were hundreds of dreadlords who were guides, and it did not take long for them to start using these terrifying technologies in the army. In less than half a year, tens of millions of new demons with Harlesian genes were born in the huge incubation pool of the mothership. Compared to their seniors, their bodies were undoubtedly stronger, and they were more sensitive to energy. They could easily cast destructive spells that only high-level demon lords could use in the past. In addition, the new demons also showed unparalleled coordination. They were no longer like the past, filled with madness, chaos, tyranny, and the oppression of the strong against the weak. On the contrary, they had an unprecedented identity and consciousness recognition with each other. Vaguely, they formed two distinct camps with the Eridar warlocks, the Lords of the Abyss, the Dreadlords, and the Doomkeepers. Gradually, They even began to disobey each other's leadership. There was no doubt that there was some mysterious power hidden in the genes of the Harlesians, causing the current changes. Zhang Cheng deliberately turned a blind eye to the opposition between the new demons and the primitive demons, allowing them to secretly scheme against each other while he focused on analyzing the information sent by the Dreadlords. As the only intelligent race on this lonely planet, the Harlesians were born 47 million years ago. Of course, this so-called year did not refer to the time it took for the Earth to orbit the Sun, but to the completion of a periodic change in the magnetic field of this dark planet. It was about 27,000 hours. The moment this process was completed, almost all the energy crystals would emit a dazzling light. Although it would only last for a few seconds, it could make the Harlesians realize the passage of time. Moreover, almost every major city had to be built on a complete crystal. Only in this way could the crops and animals grown around it thrive and multiply. Otherwise, in the open wilderness and on the surface, it would be completely in a desolate state. It could be said that the large number of crystals inside the planet was the foundation of the Harlesians as, for the legendary Harleson's Eye, it was said that it was in the hands of a mysterious organization that called itself Gurus. They were publicly recognized as the oldest and wisest member of the Harleson people. There were a total of 37 people, including their identities and headquarters. To be exact, it was forbidden to talk about topics related to them in Harlesian society. A mysterious organization that is separated from ordinary people beholds the most powerful weapon of the entire race. He was really cautious enough, but it doesn't matter. I will let you understand that the most terrifying enemies often don't come from the outside, but from the inside. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a chilling smile. He turned to the clone female adjutant who helped to manage the huge army and said, "Go, contact my Dreadlords and have them start to create rumors, panic, and riots. Incite the Harlesians to hate their ruling class, especially the high and mighty elders, and then wait for an opportunity to create conflict and opposition." Understood. The female adjutant with a proud figure bent down and bowed deeply before turning to leave the room. Admiring her seductive back, Zhang Cheng touched his chin and muttered to himself, "Selfishness is the nature of all intelligent life. No intelligent life is an exception. Perhaps the Harlesians can restrain it through religion, beliefs, and habits, but it is impossible to eradicate it. What I have to do is to water and fertilize the seeds buried deep in the soil, patiently watch them take root and sprout, and eventually grow into towering trees." Relying on advanced communication methods, in less than 2 hours, the Dreadlords lurking among the Harlesians received a mission and began to contact their own kind, specifically choosing targets with weak wills. Some of them started from the feelings between young people, while others encouraged those ambitious and capable fellows to seize power from the older generation. In about half a year, at least 6 underground cities on the Dark Planet broke out in rebellions, and even more began fierce political struggles just for the power that was at their fingertips. The wise elders of the Harlesians clearly noticed that something was wrong and tried to investigate what had happened. Unfortunately, once the seed known as selfishness took root and sprouted among the people, it could no longer be suppressed, especially the bold young people who didn't understand how much damage their actions would cause to the entire race. Their minds were filled with thoughts that once they obtained the supreme power, they could lead the race to greater power, and even leave their homeland to explore the vast and boundless sky. That's right. The Dreadlords took full advantage of the young people's tendency to be hot-blooded and easily agitated, successfully turning them into the source and scourge of social unrest. It was a pity that these fellows still thought that they were right, and that those old fellows holding on to power were a complete waste of time. He. Look at those idiots. They're like male dogs, just a little stimulation, and they'll act according to our will. A Dreadlord hid in the dark and let out a sinister laugh. He admitted that these dark-skinned humanoid creatures were very powerful, so powerful that even the Burning Legion would be wiped out in a short period of time. But the problem was that the long-term, peaceful environment had protected them too well, so their personalities were filled with countless naive and childish thoughts, and they didn't know how to guard against the people they were familiar with. Don't be careless. Don't forget that the mission Master gave us is to completely disrupt the order. There are only a few cities that are rioting now, and it's far from enough, another Dreadlord reminded. Don't worry, my dear brother. The humans have a saying that a single spark can start a prairie fire. Since the fire has already been ignited, it won't be far before it engulfs the entire planet. Chapter 1008. A scholar once said that no regime was willing to fail, so every transfer of power would be filled with unimaginable violence and chaos. The winner would naturally become the new ruler and establish order and law that were beneficial to themselves, while the loser would be cruelly slaughtered and purged. There had never been an exception since ancient times. At least according to the history of Earth, there had not been a situation of the so-called peaceful transfer of power for the time being. Although the Harlesians were not strictly a society with particularly prominent class and conflict. On the contrary, their organizational structure was closer to the atmosphere of a primitive society and a clan commune. But as everyone knew, where there were people, there were interests. Where there were interests, there were right and wrong. Where there were right and wrong, there were love and hate. Where there were love and hate, there were disputes. Where there were disputes, there were factions. Where there were factions, there were politics. Where there were politics, there were transactions. Where there were transactions, there were grievances. In short, as long as someone took a careful look with a magnifying glass, no matter how harmonious a group was, they could find countless tiny cracks. If these fissures were intentionally enlarged and mixed in some private goods to instigate conflicts between two people or groups, the result would often be disastrous. How is it? Is my plan going well? Zhang Cheng sat in the mothership, admiring the war scenes transmitted back from the ground, while asking without turning his head. Of course, it couldn't be any smoother. Let them kill each other? This idea is amazing. You know what? Just now, in less than half an hour, their casualties have exceeded the total number of casualties of the First Expeditionary Army. Old Chun praised loudly without hesitation. While praising, he did not forget to glance at the cold woman not far away with a playful gaze. But unfortunately, the latter was obviously a person with facial paralysis. No matter what kind of stimulation, she would not show even the slightest bit of anger. She stood in place without saying a word, constantly using the equipment in her hands to record the various data on the battlefield. After a few minutes, she took the initiative to say, "Since you have successfully provoked the civil war of the Harlesians, you must have obtained a lot of their bodies, right?" "That's right." Zhang Cheng nodded lightly, not trying to hide anything. As a person with an infinite thirst for knowledge, he never hid his evil, cruel, and crazy side, and sometimes even showed it. "Give me 1,000. In return, I'll give you a special group of soldiers." The woman put forward her conditions directly. "Special?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's right. Not long ago, I integrated the genes of an interesting reptilian intelligent life form and created." Before the woman could finish her words, Old Chin immediately stood up and interrupted. "Damn it. Could it be that he wanted to take that thing out to make a deal? Was he crazy? That thing can't be controlled." "Uncontrollable?" The woman smiled contemptuously and pointed at the newborn demons that could be seen everywhere on the mothership. "Do you think they can be controlled by hand?" "No, idiot. These guys whose hearts were filled with the desire to kill, destroy, and destroy were also uncontrollable. But why would they be willing to submit to a single person? The answer was simple. That person would give them what they wanted. By the same logic, although my creations are not 100% obedient like the cloned soldiers or the war machines controlled by artificial intelligence, as long as the desire in their hearts can be satisfied, they will still obey orders. That sounds reasonable. I'm curious. What are you talking about just now? Is it like the so-called Zerg described in the sci-fi movies? Zhang Cheng raised his head and looked into the woman's eyes. Zerg? No, I won't create such low-level things. They're not even qualified to be cannon fodder. What I created is a powerful and perfect life form. To be exact, it's a mother. She can combine with any life form and integrate the excellent parts of the other party's genes. Then, she can undergo mass fertilization to speed up the growth rate and create an army from nothing. Believe me, as long as you see her, you will fall in love with her without reservation. She's a masterpiece of biotechnology with unlimited possibilities. The woman raised her chin and explained proudly. Don't listen to her. That thing is dangerous. The organization once used it in a landing battle. The monster only took 3 days to devour all the life on a planet, leaving only a bunch of deformed and sick monsters. Old Chen quickly gave his opinion. It was not difficult to see from his extremely disgusted eyes that this so-called mother was so terrifying that it was sealed after the test. Zhang Cheng touched his chin and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he responded with a smile, "Deal. I want that mother. Later, I'll ask the adjutant to send the body back to the headquarters." "Thank you. Believe me, you won't regret this deal." Then, the woman turned around and left without staying for a second. Watching her gradually disappear, Old Chen subconsciously frowned and asked, "Didn't you want to teach her a lesson? Why did you make a deal with her?" "There's no difference between teaching her a lesson and making a deal with her. The reason why I did it is because I think this deal is beneficial to me. Teaching her a lesson is something that will happen after the Dark Planet is completely conquered. You have to understand that the more you want to deal with an enemy, the more you have to show a friendly side to make them lower their guard unknowingly. Then, when they think you become friends, you can stab them in the back." Even though Zhang Cheng's tone was gentle, as if he was whispering in the ear of his sweetheart when he said this, it gave off a chilling feeling. "Oh my God, your dark personality won't be liked by many people in the organization." The corner of Old Chen's mouth twitched. "Why should I be liked by many people? No, I just need to let the initiator understand that I'm more valuable than anyone else in the organization and that I can help him win one war after another. That's enough. As for other things, there's no need to care too much. After all, we're not having a fellowship party. Instead of wasting time and energy on maintaining fake feelings between each other, why don't we use our brains more and complete the battle plan as soon as possible?" "Oh, you know the initiator very well?" "I just know myself very well. Don't forget, we're all ourselves in a parallel universe. As long as we're willing to put in some effort, it's not difficult to understand the initiator's thoughts." "Then what about me? What do you think I desire?" "You're just an executor, without a clear thought or purpose. You're just like those ordinary people who just dawdle around. Unless the organization gives you an order, you'll always be lazy." Chapter 1009. Gray fog shrouded the surface of the Dark Planet. Apart from using advanced electronic imaging technology, it was impossible to see more than 5 meters away. However, the Harlesians were clearly not included in this. Due to the lack of light all year round, the Dark Planet was always in an extremely cold state, especially the surface temperature, which was close to -200 degrees Celsius. Normally, it was impossible for life to survive here. However, what was interesting was that the temperature would greatly increase near those large energy crystals. It would even melt the frozen water, forming mountains, lakes, and rivers. With water, there would be a source of life. All sorts of plants and animals would flourish, providing a good living environment and food source. It was precisely because of this that the Harlesians used the large energy crystals as the main body to build majestic underground cities. After tens of millions of years of exploration and searching, they had found almost all the large energy crystals on the surface of the planet. Therefore, whoever controlled more cities would become the true master of the planet. Several hundred fully armed youths were silently approaching the entrance of an underground city at an extremely fast speed. To be precise, this wasn't an underground city in the ordinary sense, but the place of origin of their entire race. At the same time, it was also the first gathering place created with the help of energy shortcuts. It was seen as the holy land of civilization, race, and religion, the first city. As the internal divisions and conflicts within the Harlesians became more and more serious, the Dreadlords finally could not hold back and planned a symbolic attack. These fools were naturally bewitched and instigated, thinking that they could use pure violence to create chaos and destruction, forcing the older fellows to lower their heads and hand over the power in their hands. The future of the Harlesians should be created by the youths, not by a bunch of decadent old fellows. This was the idea that the Dreadlords had been secretly instilling in the youths. They had even established an organization to oppose the Elder Council, establishing a basic structure of power. As schemers, they knew very well that once the youths at the bottom of society tasted power, they would quickly lose their original naivety and gradually degenerate into ambitious people willing to do anything for power. As the first lord of Nazresm of the new Burning Legion, Balaam was now the undisputed leader of the rebellion. He hid alone in a crevice between the icy rocks, carefully observing the situation in front of him. After a few hours, he calmly ordered his assistant beside him, "Go. Have 2 small teams disguise themselves as merchants in distress and approach the entrance to test the city's reaction." Understood. Another Dreadlord who occupied a Harlesian nodded without hesitation. He raised his left hand and waved at his companion, who was hiding not far away. The latter understood and immediately changed into tattered clothes. He used dirty leather to cover the crystal wrist guard that symbolized the status and strength of a warrior and pretended to be in a sorry state as he ran towards the entrance. About 10 minutes later, when they approached the metal door inlaid with black patterns, 2 dazzling beams of light shot down from above, illuminating the only passage. In an instant, the 2 teams of 20 people were completely exposed to the enemy's line of sight. In the blink of an eye, a man in dark brown leather appeared above the tall city gate. He shouted at the top of his voice, "This is the sacred land of origin of the Harlesians. Tell me your names and where you came from. Otherwise, I have the right to deny you entry." "We are merchants. We just encountered a terrifying attack. A group of ugly and ferocious monsters suddenly jumped out of the darkness and killed 2/3 of the people in the team. We're the only survivors." The woman in the lead said the lie she had prepared without hesitation. "Monsters? Are they those huge and ugly fellows with green flames in their eyes?" The man on top of the city gate asked with a frown. The woman quickly nodded. "That's right. They seem to have lost their minds and rushed in to kill. Even though we resisted with all our might, we were still outnumbered. Damn it, this is already the 30th attack in the past few months. We have to think of a way." The man gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice as he waved behind him. "Open the city gate and let these poor youths in." Rumble, with a loud noise, the gate made of an unknown metal was slowly pulled up, revealing a passage about 2 meters tall. The members of the 2 teams exchanged glances with each other and immediately tore off their camouflage. They rushed in extremely fast speed and launched an attack on the warriors on the city gate. Before the other side could react, they quickly took control of the city gate and sent out a signal. Seeing 2 dazzling red lights rise into the sky, Balaam couldn't help but reveal a ferocious smile. He shouted, "Charge, my brothers and sisters! Charge in! Take down this sacred city! Let those stupid old fellows understand that we are the hope and tomorrow of the entire race. For justice and justice, for the future of the Harlesians. Overthrow the Elder Council." When countless people broke through the gate while shouting exciting slogans and releasing their powerful energy without restraint, a black figure suddenly appeared beside Balaam and sighed with a faint smile. "Huh, young people are always so hot-blooded and easily used by others, aren't they?" "Yes, master. Limited by experience and vision, very few young people can understand that the more righteous things seem on the surface, the dirtier the true intentions behind them. They will unknowingly become an accomplice of evil. The most ridiculous thing is that they will die thinking that they are sacrificing themselves for the right thing. Noble and despicable, righteous and evil, order and chaos. I like such a strong conflict and contrast." After saying that, Balaam placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. Obviously, this black figure was none other than Zhang Cheng's projection from the mothership. Feeling the constant flames and loud noises coming from the city in the distance, he couldn't help but nods slightly. Although it sounds full of irony, I have to admit that what you said is very reasonable. How about it? Do you think you can find clues about the secret weapon in this city of origin? Sorry, I don't know, Master, but I have a hunch that there must be some secrets in this city that you are interested in. Well, then I'll wait and see. If you can really find information or clues that I'm interested in, then I'll reward you with a weapon, a powerful weapon that may destroy this planet. Chapter 10:10. In the cultivation room at the bottom of the huge starship, a hybrid that looked like a reptile, insect, and human woman was lying quietly in the huge cultivation tank. Judging from her body structure, it was not difficult to tell that she was an out-and-out female. Below her waist was like an ant queen. It was a huge, oval-shaped uterus that was 20 meters long. On average, every 20 centimeters or so, there was an independent compartment used to breed offspring. It could breed hundreds of lives at the same time. There was no doubt that this was the dangerous mother that was exchanged through a transaction, known as a miracle of biotechnology. How is it? She's beautiful, isn't she? The woman stretched out her hand and gently stroked the smooth and delicate skin on the mother's face. Her eyes showed a rare infatuation. One had to know that although this monster had the face of a human female, its mouth was as sharp as a praying mantis. It was densely packed with saw-like, sharp teeth, and its skin was covered with a layer of emerald green scales. It was simply hair-raising. However, not only did she not dislike or reject it, but she treated it like her own daughter. After all, the age of most of the members in the organization could no longer be verified. Excluding Zhang Cheng, who had just joined, the rest were calculated according to Earth's time. The youngest one had lived for millions of years, so it was inevitable that they would develop all kinds of strange hobbies. For example, Old Chun was an out-and-out battle maniac. Every time he launched an expedition, he liked to be the first to rush up and attack the target that posed the greatest threat. He enjoyed the pleasure of brushing past death again and again. Obviously, the woman in front of him was a typical creature obsessed. She was obsessed with creating more powerful and terrifying war machines. For her, the mother was the most perfect work she had created so far. Naturally, it was inevitable that she would pour a lot of emotions into it. As a fellow creator, Zhang Cheng was able to interpret the new activity of the other party as he chuckled and praised. That's right. She's perfect. This is the first time I've seen a life that has integrated divinity, magic, genetic technology, and energy. If you don't mind, can you tell me how you created her? Sorry, I can't say. Because her birth was an accident, it is not replicable. To put it simply, she is the only one, and she can't obey orders 100% like those clones. On the contrary, her subjective consciousness will never recognize anyone as her master, let alone obey your orders. She will only act in the way that benefits her the most. She will continuously devour the life on a planet and turn them all into her children. When she said this, the corners of the woman's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a meaningful smile. A destroyer? It doesn't matter. I happen to have a good plan. Maybe we can modify her a little. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng turned around and opened another sealed culture tank. In an instant, a jar containing a beautiful woman slowly rose up. Inside the jar was none other than the half-titaniized Arya. However, she wasn't in her normal state right now. Everything below her collarbone had been cruelly dissected, revealing all kinds of strange organs inside, as well as her energy core that looked like a small sun. Even the reproductive organs near her lower abdomen hadn't escaped. Zhang Cheng used his actions to prove that he was a man of his word. Whoever he said he would chop into 8 pieces on the experiment table, he would chop them into 8 pieces. Of course, as a half-titaniized Arya wouldn't die so easily. To be precise, Zhang Cheng didn't kill her on purpose because he couldn't be sure she would return to her astral soul state and escape after death. Instead, he kept her in this half-dead state and sealed her up. But now, he suddenly had a more interesting idea, and that was to fuse the maternal body filled with animal instincts with Arya. Oh my God, you're really crazy. But I like it. The woman stared at the half-titaniized body with an excited expression. Yes, it was excitement, not anger. not disgust. Then, are you interested in working together? Zhang Chang invited with a smile. For such a huge and complicated task, his current accumulated knowledge was far from enough. Thus, working together was the only choice. It's my pleasure. Looks like you're not as brainless as I thought. At least you're still useful in some aspects. Believe me, we're surprisingly similar in some aspects. I hope so. I don't like to work with mediocre people. With Zhang Cheng's conscious cooperation, the two madmen, who had long put ethical and moral constraints in their hearts, began an inhumane and crazy experiment. One had to know that it wasn't an easy task to fuse two high-level life forms with high consciousness and powerful bodies. The fields involved far exceeded the fields of pure science or mysticism. Each of them had to play their best parts to ensure that no mistakes were made. Otherwise, who knew what kind of monster would be created after the fusion? Fortunately, they weren't people who liked to stick to the rules, but they also didn't reject new knowledge and creativity. In just a little over a week, they came up with several feasible preliminary plans. What they had to do next was naturally to carry out some live experiments to see which plans had the highest failure rate and carry out the first round of elimination. Zhang Cheng had no idea that while he was working hard, Old Chun, who had returned to the headquarters, had accurately located the Song of Ice and Fire world through the launch detector and was watching a reality show with a large group of bored people. To be precise, it should be called the Passion of Valeni, because this unlucky fellow had now become a wanted criminal in the entire world. He clearly had countless gold in his pockets, but he could only wander around like a beggar. He ate the worst food, drank the worst wine, and would immediately hide when he discovered the slightest disturbance. It was obvious that this was far from the good life he had originally expected, and he was almost driven to mental illness. This is the guy who offended the newcomer? A woman holding popcorn raised her eyebrows in disbelief. Anyone who wasn't a fool could see that the suffering Valeni was suffering was far crueler than directly killing him or locking him in a dungeon and torturing him constantly. The latter was just physical abuse, but he was now suffering unparalleled mental torture, and as time passed, the pain would become deeper and deeper, and he would become more and more desperate. Chapter 10:11. Bah, damn it. It's been 3 months. I don't believe these damned mercenaries can continue like this. Valeni didn't seem to notice that his every move was being shown to a group of spectators. He was minding his own business as he tore apart a fat rat and stuffed the bloody meat into his mouth. His eyes were like those of a hungry wolf, emitting a terrifying green light. Ever since he escaped the betrayal of the merchant Quills, he had been hiding in the complicated sewers of King's Landing for more than half a year. He had spent more than half of his time running away. If he stopped, he would immediately attract an endless number of pursuers if he came into contact with anyone in the future. From a certain perspective, he was practically the public enemy of all humans in this world. There was no place for him in the civilized world. The Death Knight, Shuma, had traveled to almost every human settlement on the planet with his mount, spreading the power of the dead without restraint. Therefore, even if the authorities were concerned about their own lives, they would still try their best to find Warrant and use his head to appease the wrath of the monsters. It had to be said that apart from pain and torture, there was basically no joy in such a life. The reason Valeni was still persevering was that he didn't want to admit defeat just like that. He also had the miraculous ability to see through fate and knew that he still had a chance to completely turn the situation around. As he felt the stench of the rat meat enter his stomach through his esophagus, the intense burning sensation caused by the corrosive acid gradually dissipated. His exhausted body finally recovered a bit of strength. However, Valeni didn't dare to let his guard down. He still maintained an extremely high level of vigilance. Even though he hadn't slept well for 2 days, he still forced himself to open his eyes wide and stare at the movements in the distance. It couldn't be helped. Even though the sewers of King's Landing were complicated and huge, there were only a few places where people could hide. Who knew when some mercenaries, thieves, and beggars would sneak in? In order to obtain the high bounty offered by Daenerys Targaryen, as well as land and noble titles, The citizens of this city had already fallen into a frenzy. Even a clue or a piece of information could be sold for hundreds or thousands of gold coins. Everyone thought that they would be the lucky ones, leaping out of poverty and hunger and becoming a noble that everyone envied. In particular, the poor people who lived in the flea nest only had one life left. Many of them had even tasted the brown soup that was mixed with the flesh of the dead. Naturally, they did not mind risking their lives for a happy life for the rest of their lives. Unbelievable. Is this the guy I mentioned last time? Are you sure that he only threatened a rookie before suffering such a terrifying revenge? A man who looked to be in his 30s stared at the three-dimensional image formed by the refraction of countless rays of light and raised his eyebrows in surprise. While drinking his beer, Old Chin replied with a faint smile. That's right. Unbelievable, right? Normally, a normal person's desire for revenge would not be so strong, but he did not hesitate to choose the cruelest way. There is no negotiation, no compromise, and no giving up. You mean his mental state isn't normal? The other woman frowned subconsciously. Although Zhang Cheng had joined the organization for a period of time, he wasn't like most rookies who took the initiative to integrate into the group. Instead, he was extremely cold and reclusive. Ever since he took on the mission, he had never left his mothership. No, what I mean is that he almost abandoned all of his humanity in the process of the trial. So it's best if you don't treat him as your own kind. Old Chin finished the bubbling light yellow liquid in his cup in one gulp and gave a meaningful answer. Humanity? Are you sure there are still people among us who keep this thing? The man who spoke first pursed his lips and smiled disdainfully. After all, almost everyone here bore the burden of the deaths of billions of lives. Genocide and the destruction of star systems were common occurrences. Ha ha, your joke is very funny. Yes, although we have done many inhumane things, it is undeniable that many members of the organization still retain some of their humanity. At least, the habits they had when they were humans are still there. For example, I like to drink when I have nothing to do, and some women still have the habit of flirting with the opposite sex or talking about love. These are habits that are no longer necessary, but are perfectly preserved. It is the embodiment of our humanity that has not been extinguished. But he is different. He has even abandoned all of his human habits, leaving only a heart that pursues power, knowledge, and transcendence. Old Chun explained with a laugh. So, what are you trying to say? I don't want to say anything. I just want you to understand a principle. Don't try to use the little tricks you used to deal with this newcomer. Otherwise, what awaits you will be endless revenge. Moreover, it won't be long before he becomes the most capable assistant in the eyes of the initiators. He might even obtain a main string as a forward base and obtain the permission to independently expand to the outside world. What? That's impossible. Nothing is impossible. I suggest that you go take a look at the latest progress on the Dark Planet. The race that easily destroyed the expedition fleet is currently in a state of internal strife. It won't be long before he destroys and occupies that planet, clearing the obstacles for him to obtain a new main string. Just as Old Chun was discussing Zhang Cheng with more than 10 members of the organization, the initiator was sitting on an extremely old wooden recliner in an independent room on the highest level of the base. He narrowed his eyes and admired the real-time images sent back by the advanced equipment. After a full 10 minutes, he smiled and sighed. He is very smart. He is more capable than all of us imagined. At this rate, this universe will soon be under our control. I admit that he is indeed the most outstanding among all of the newcomers. But please don't forget that this guy has never shown any intention of integrating into the group. On the contrary, he seems to be more interested in establishing a small group that is independent of the organization. This is a dangerous signal. It might become a hidden danger for the split. A man with a black eye patch at the door reminded. I know, but considering the huge threat that the organization is about to face, it doesn't matter if he is temporarily independent. While saying this, the initiator's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. He raised his left hand and took out a small golden box from the cabinet. Opening the box, a round black meteorite was seen inside. It constantly released a shocking amount of energy, causing all of the surrounding equipment to lose control involuntarily. Space seemed to have lost its most important fulcrum and started to collapse. Fortunately, this state lasted less than a minute. As the lid closed, everything returned to normal. Chapter 10:12. Master. According to the information we obtained in the great library of the Harrisons' Holy Land, Harrisons, I should be a huge energy crystal connected to the core of the planet. In ancient times, their ancestors accidentally discovered a way to manipulate and use this thing and completely weaponized it, destroying all the enemies on the Dark Planet at that time. On the huge mothership, Balaam's projection was kneeling on one knee and telling him all the information he had obtained after the raid on the Holy City. Without a doubt, the Harrisons were not born to dominate the Dark Planet, just like most intelligent beings in the universe. At first, they were only one of the many intelligent beings on this planet. The number and quality of their race were far from being strong, and they were often bullied or even enslaved by other races. However, with the discovery of Harrison's Eye, this race had become the only intelligent race on the Dark Planet in less than 50 years. As for the other competitors, it was as if they had all evaporated overnight and disappeared without a trace. Anyone who wasn't a fool could understand how bloody and violent the history hidden in these 50 years was. There was no need to ask to know that the rest of the intelligent races had all been killed, and even the civilizations and cities they had created had been completely erased. Only a few words were left in a few ancient books for future generations to guess. Interesting. So, gurus deliberately created an organization to control this secret weapon? Zhang Cheng asked with interest as he rubbed his chin. Balaam hurriedly nodded. That's right. According to my investigation, gurus only absorbs the wisest members of the Council of Elders, and once they choose to join, they must completely draw a line with the past and disappear from their own race forever. No one knows how many members gurus has, and no one knows where they are hiding. The only thing they know is that these guys hold the ultimate secret of the Harrisons, including the origin of life on the entire Dark Planet. Well done. Looks like you really got a lot of useful information from that raid. I'm very satisfied with that. As a reward, I will give you a living weapon, an ultimate weapon that can destroy the Harrisonian civilization. Make good use of her and dig out gurus for me, no matter where they hide. Zhang Cheng gave the order with a cold expression. As you wish, my great and evil master. Balaam bowed deeply, his face almost touching the ground. Although he still didn't know what this so-called final weapon was, his heart was filled with anticipation. After the Elder Council recovered from the initial shock and began to suppress the riots caused by the young people, the organization he led was having a harder time every day. The number of members was also decreasing. Most of them were captured and locked up, undergoing the dual transformation of their minds and bodies. But now, it was finally time to switch from defense to offense. Due to the difference in temperature between the terrifying heat emitted by the huge crystals in the underground city and the terrifyingly low temperature on the surface world, the indescribable airflow formed a terrifyingly strong wind between the city. The strongest wind force was enough to sweep a ton of objects into the air and then violently throw them back down. Especially at certain times and seasons, the astonishing winds could tear apart the earth, forming areas of absolute death. At this time, not to mention the people of Harlson, even the beasts living in the harsh environment were unwilling to leave their nests. Relying on the cover of the terrifyingly strong wind, a large landing ship risked crashing and threw a huge sealed cabin to a designated location. Then, it quickly climbed out of the dangerous atmosphere of the planet and quietly returned to the mothership. As soon as it left, Balaam brought a team composed entirely of fear demon kings to the sealed cabin and quickly entered the password. The next second clang, accompanied by the sound of the electronic cabin door opening. A monster with a metallic luster all over its body appeared out of thin air in front of them. This monster had a majestic female upper body like a titan, a huge lower body like an ant queen, and centipede-like feet on both sides of its body. Its scarlet eyes flashed with a hungry light. She stared at the feared demon kings occupying the bodies of the Harlson people in front of her and said in an extremely hoarse voice, "Food! Give me food. Otherwise, I'll eat you. Damn it. Quick, feed her." Balaam's expression changed drastically as he yelled at his subordinates. He was no fool. Naturally, he could feel the powerful aura that the other party unintentionally emitted. There was no need to ask to know that this monster, known as the Mother, was far stronger than him. If it didn't satisfy its thirst, he would definitely be eaten as food. Shock, trembling, fear. After realizing what a terrifying monster Zhang Cheng had sent over, every feared demon king tried their best to trick the Harlson people over, allowing the Mother to tear them into pieces and swallow them, turning them into eggs one after another. In less than a few months, the temporary underground cave was densely packed with oval white insect eggs about 1 meter in diameter. When the first batch of eggs hatched, Balaam finally understood why his master said that the Mother was the ultimate weapon to destroy the Dark Planet. Because every deformed larva that hatched had more than 10 times the physical fitness and energy affinity of the Harlson people. Most importantly, they grew extremely fast. In less than 15 days, they could enter the youth stage and begin to hunt wild beasts in the wild, or the Harlson caravans, patrols, and hunting teams. Several times, the Elders' Council sent out warriors to hunt down the youth rebels, but they were all ambushed by these fellows in the wild and killed one by one. When their numbers reached a certain level, they would directly attack and occupy cities with smaller populations, slaughtering thousands of civilians and turning them into food reserves that were necessary for reproduction. Standing on the street filled with the smell of blood, Balaam looked at the busy, deformed larvae with vigilance and fear. Without turning his head, he said to the others behind him, "Do you know what these fellows remind me of? Don't tell me it's Nazul and his undead calamity?" Another feared demon king asked carefully. "That's right. Excluding the difference in strength, their actions are almost the same. They all use the enemy as nourishment to strengthen themselves. The more they wage war, the stronger they will become, and eventually, they will become invincible." Balaam gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. "Unfortunately, we don't have Master's authorization, and we can't restrict her unscrupulous expansion. Don't worry, my dear brother. Don't forget, there's a powerful weapon on this planet. When she starts to threaten the survival of the Harlson people, those old fellows in hiding will naturally react." Chapter 10:13. Slaughter, devour, reproduce deformed offspring. In less than half a year, the strengthened Mother had destroyed more than 500 underground cities of the Dark Planet. Almost every time, she would slaughter all life and continuously reduce the living space of the Harlesian people. The most terrifying thing was that as she devoured more and more corpses, she began to completely crack the mysteries of the Harlesian people's ability to control and absorb energy at the genetic level. The deformed creatures she cultivated became stronger and stronger, even far surpassing the most powerful warriors of the Harlesian people. With the help of biosynthesis technology, the deformed monsters with large crystals embedded in their bodies could easily kill more than 10 times the number of enemies. Especially when they exploded before their deaths, they could raze everything within hundreds of kilometers to the ground. To a certain extent, the Mother was equivalent to the queen of the swarm, and the offspring she gave birth to were equivalent to the boundless swarm. These ferocious and ugly monsters had no fear, nor would they hesitate in the slightest when ordered. Even if they knew that the Mother's order was to send them to their deaths, they would still carry it out without hesitation. Such perfect obedience and astonishing combat strength was not something that 1 or 2 underground cities could resist. It had to be known that the Dark Planet was a standard example of a sparsely populated place. Most of the land was an uninhabitable death zone. Therefore, by the time the remaining underground cities reacted and began to form an alliance to deal with this crisis, the deformed creatures had already occupied a small half of the planet, and their numbers were uncountable. In comparison, the newly born demons were much inferior. They only occupied 30 or so cities and used them as a foundation to wantonly mine energy crystals to arm themselves. Some of the engineers even created brand new war machines. Not to mention, there's a large group of fear demon kings lurking in the Harlesian society. By constantly attacking the Elder Council and inciting riots, they completely controlled a group of radical young people. In order to unite all the forces that could be united, many underground cities promised that as long as they safely survived this crisis, they would change the rules that had been established for thousands of years, allowing them to hold power and become a governing body that could contend against the Elder Council. There is no doubt that Zhang Cheng was using all kinds of methods to continuously weaken the war potential of the Harlesian people and destroy the powerful self-confidence they had built up. If this was the course of a normal war, as long as there was no major mistake in the following plan, victory would be guaranteed. But the problem was that the biggest difference between a Great Flux War and an ordinary war was that no one knew what bizarre things would happen in the next second. Looking at the large number of battle records stored in the database, it was not difficult to discover that more than half of them would use weapons that were difficult to accurately describe in words when the battle was about to end. Some of them were so powerful that they could instantly destroy a huge interstellar fleet with a single strike. Some of them were extremely strange, either causing more than half of the fleet to defect, or summoning a group of mysterious creatures without physical bodies from the void to devour the expeditionary fleet in just a few minutes. In short, when initiating a superstring war, the commander had to be fully mentally prepared and not let down his guard until the last second. How is it? Is there still no movement from gurus? Zhang Cheng frowned and asked. Balaam's 3D image knelt on one knee and replied in a rather helpless tone, "Yes, master." It was as if they had completely disappeared, never showing their faces from beginning to end. However, I believe that as long as the situation continues to deteriorate, they will definitely not be able to resist taking action. After all, Gurus was founded to ensure that the Harlesian civilization could continue. Guardian of the Darkness? Sounds interesting. Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and nodded thoughtfully. Then he asked, what about the mysteries of the Harlesians' absorption and control of energy? Have you found any clues? Found it. Just as you guessed, this planet is essentially too close to the main string. It's basically a huge energy crystal, but it's covered with a layer of soil and rock about 20,000 meters thick. To a certain extent, this planet is a crystallization created by the external energy of the string, and it has a certain degree of resonance with the main string itself. So you can understand it as an extension of the main string's power. Fear Demon King explained with a fanatical expression. Oh, in that case, rather than saying that Harleson's eye is the power of the dark planet's core, it's better to say that a huge energy crystal resonates with the main string, which is why it produces such unimaginable, terrifying power. Zhang Cheng curled the corners of his mouth, revealing a trace of excitement and anticipation. That's right, but it's just a guess. I can't find any evidence to prove it for the time being. Balaam gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. With the broadening of his horizons and a deeper understanding of the nature of power, he gradually got rid of the shackles of his bloodline and began to evolve in the direction of a higher life form. His entire body emitted a cold and evil aura. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to say something, another dot of light flashed on the surface of the dark planet. The next second, the small half of the planet occupied by the mother was completely covered by a dazzling light. Hundreds of millions of deformed bodies instantly disintegrated into countless high-energy particles. Coupled with the impact of the energy crystals, the area covered by the strong light was immediately turned upside down. All the layers were thrown into the atmosphere by the terrifying impact, and the crystalline body of the planet below was revealed at a glance. Seeing this scene, Zhang Cheng suddenly stood up from his chair. He stared at the star crystal that was hundreds of millions of times brighter than any star and muttered to himself, "So that's how it is. This is the true appearance of the dark planet, a special celestial body that can resonate with the main string. If I can get it and make it into a weapon, then I'll have my first trump card in the superstring war." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and gave an order to his adjutant standing not far away. Immediately have the fleet activate the Purge Protocol. Half an hour later, launch a destructive bombardment, then send landing ships to airborne ground units. This time, I'm going to personally take action and capture the remaining Harlson people, turning them into important war resources in the future. As you wish, Commander. The clone adjutant placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly, then pressed the red button on his right without hesitation. Instantly, the huge fleet that stopped near the main string sounded a piercing Level 1 combat alert siren at the same time. In less than 2 minutes, all the spaceship's engines ignited and headed straight for the dark planet. Chapter 1014. Beep, beep, beep. Warning. Commander Zhang Cheng has activated the Purge Protocol in the C-1240 region of the sixth-dimensional universe. Target, Dark Planet. Warning. The Purge Protocol will be activated in 15 minutes. At that time, the first round of bombardment from the stellar-level main cannon will be launched. As the ear-piercing sound echoed in the base, every member of the organization realized what had happened and gathered in the conference room as quickly as possible. Old Chun, who was more familiar with Zhang Cheng, stared with wide eyes at the dazzling light emitted by the charging main cannons of the motherships on the 3D projections and finally could not help but exclaim, "Damn it! Is this guy crazy? He actually activated the Purge Protocol so close to the main string. Doesn't he know that the attack from the stellar-level main cannon can easily trigger the resonance of the main string and cause the energy of the matter within hundreds of thousands of light years to explode instantly? We have to stop him. Activate the emergency limit valve. Terminate the Purge Protocol." Another member suggested with a serious expression. However, before the others around him could say anything, the initiator stood up and stopped them. "Enough. I have said many times before that the commander of the war zone has the right to make the decision he thinks is right, even if the result violates common sense. This is because the superstring war has never been a war that can be deduced based on common sense. But Initiator, his reckless action will very likely turn the C-1240 region into a death zone that cannot be approached and will greatly hinder our expansion speed." A woman stood up and spoke of the possible serious consequences. "Don't worry. Up until now, we have almost expanded to the limit. Even if we stop and digest for a while, it won't be a problem. Also, please don't forget that our real enemy has been silent for a long time. It won't be long before they make a comeback. When that time comes, having a sharp and bold commander will give us an unimaginable advantage." After saying that, the initiator no longer paid attention to anyone else and focused on the 3D projection without showing any expression on his face. The speed of the massive fleet was extremely fast. In just a short 10 minutes or so, they had surrounded the dark planet and aimed countless cannons at the surface of the planet. Anyone who was not blind would be able to see the dazzling beams of light coming from the cannons. Zhang Cheng, who was sitting in the mothership, obviously did not know that his actions had caused a considerable degree of chaos, and there were countless pairs of eyes watching the fleet's every move. After waiting for the red button to stop flashing, the clone adjutant bent down and reported, "Sir Commander, all the main cannons were fully charged. This is the last confirmation. Do you really want to activate the Purge Agreement?" "That's right. Let's start." Zhang Cheng crossed his arms and rested his chin on his hand, giving an affirmative answer without hesitation. "Confirmed. The Purge Agreement was activated. Begin firing." Accompanied by the clone adjutant's beautiful voice, thousands of dazzling high-energy particle beams shot out from a main cannon and launched a destructive attack on the Harlesian underground city that had already been explored. Almost 90% of the lives on the Dark Planet were annihilated in this round of bombardment. Even the 20,000 meters of thick rock layer covering the surface did not escape the disaster. If you thought this was the Purge Agreement, you were gravely mistaken. Before the remaining Harlesians on the ground could react to what had happened, thousands of antimatter bombs carried by small high-speed aircraft launched a second saturation attack on the ground. No mercy. No mercy. No laughable rules of war. There was only destruction and slaughter. This was the Purge Agreement. Destroy a planet or a star system at all costs. In fact, when the organization conquered the entire three-dimensional universe, they had activated the Purge Agreement in many places. Even though the fleet back then was not as large as it was now, and the technology was much more advanced, there were still many terrifying legends left behind. After the antimatter bombs plowed the ground for the second time, the landing ship methodically released a large number of land combat units. The first batch was naturally war machines completely controlled by artificial intelligence. Although they were not large in size, only less than half a meter tall, they looked like spiders. Not only were they very fast, but they were also very agile. They could discover hidden enemies in the surroundings in time and transmit data to the terminal in time, sharing it with every combat unit. It could be said that these little guys were the eyes and ears of the land combat units. Just as more than a third of the landing ship released the fully loaded land units to the designated location, Harleson's I finally activated again, instantly destroying 70% of the land units and more than half of the space fleet. Similarly, because most of the soil on the surface of the dark planet had been overturned, the other party had also exposed their position. Ha ha ha! Great! I knew you wouldn't disappoint me. Zhang Cheng laughed maniacally as he jumped out of the mothership, directly transforming into the extremely majestic body of a stellar-level titan. He aimed at the Harlesians surrounding a large energy crystal pillar and threw out a powerful group instant death spell. Whoosh! The negative energy that symbolized death instantly enveloped the entire area. Not only did it clear out all the other energy in the surroundings, even the air was squeezed out. 10 Harlesians' blood vessels burst on the spot, and they fell straight to the ground. The rest were all heavily injured and lost their guidance to the energy pillar. No, don't stop. For the future of our race, even if we have to risk our lives, we have to kill these invaders. Get up, get up. The leader of the group, an old man who was so old that only his skin and dog head were left, roared loudly. There was no need to ask to know that he was the supreme leader of gurus, an old monster who had lived for countless years. However, this old fellow clearly didn't realize that the most dangerous enemy was behind him. Balaam, who was disguised as a Harlesian, took advantage of the fact that the other party wasn't paying attention and directly restored the true body of the Fear Demon King. He raised his sharp claws and directly pierced through his chest, digging out the boiling heart and crushing it with a bang. Yu, relying on the strong vitality of his race, the old man did not immediately die. Instead, he turned around and raised his trembling right hand to point at the Fear Demon King. The latter grinned and mocked. That's right, it's me. From the very beginning, I was a chess piece sent by my master to mess with you. It's ridiculous that you think I'm your compatriot. You failed, poor maggot. You and your clansmen will become food for the Legion. Wake up, my compatriot. The great Legion will be invincible. Chapter 10:15. Following the First Lord's shout, hundreds of dreadlords reverted to their true forms and walked out of the crowd unhurriedly, completely ignoring the shock, fear, and disbelief on the faces of the Harlesians around them. Not long after, they gathered together and looked at the refugees with mocking and sarcastic eyes that were less than 1% of the original population. Without a doubt, disintegrating a race that was countless times stronger than them and slowly pushing them into the abyss of eternal damnation gave these fellows, whose hearts were filled with darkness and evil desires, a strong sense of satisfaction. To be precise, what they liked to do the most was to infiltrate the enemy and create conflict through a series of provocations, instigation, and conflict. They could make the originally united opponents fight each other and exhaust their potential to the greatest extent. Now, looking at the proud and confident people of Harlesen kneeling on the ground with fear and despair in their eyes, every Fear Demon King couldn't help but laugh without restraint. Most importantly, by devouring the souls of the Harlesian people and occupying their bodies, the Nazresm demons had completed a qualitative leap. They had left Erida, the Abyss Lords, and the Doom Sentinels far behind and became the most powerful force in the new army. Although the newborn demons had shown great adaptability, They were still too young and could not threaten the position of the veteran lords for the time being. Submit or die. Choose. Harlesian. Balaam spread his wings and waved his sharp claws as he threatened loudly. At this moment, he no longer concealed his powerful and evil ambitions and thoughts, hoping to take this opportunity to control the remaining Harlesian people. Unfortunately, this dreadlord had underestimated the pride and strength of a race in the face of life and death. Dream on. We will never submit. We will never be slaves to you bastards. Come, warriors. It's time to show our last bit of courage. Perhaps we will die, perish, but we will never live in humiliation. For courage, for dignity and pride. Before the panicking civilians could react, thousands of warriors stood up abruptly, shouting slogans as they quickly activated the energy crystals they were wearing. In the blink of an eye, the countless energy crystals were like stars, releasing a blinding light. Even though the small crystals he wore didn't store much energy, there was a high chance that a chain reaction would resonate with the entire dark planet. The consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, Zhang Cheng, who was floating in outer space, finally reached out his huge right hand the moment these energy crystals reached the critical point. The next second, boom! With the purest physical attacks, he directly crushed tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians into minced meat. More than half of them were old, weak, women, and children who did not have the ability to resist. However, for someone like him who had completely abandoned his humanity, this little bit of damage was nothing. Zhang Cheng did not pay any attention to those unlucky fellows who were wailing on the ground and had their limbs crushed. Without thinking, he ordered, "Bring these captives onto the transport ship. Anyone who dares to resist will be killed on the spot." "As you wish, great evil master." Balaam bowed deeply. Soon, under the search of hundreds of millions of landing units, all of the remaining Harlesians were found one by one. They were either humiliated like livestock and stuffed into landing ships, or killed on the spot and shipped back with their corpses. As the losers of the Superstring War, they did not even have the right to struggle at death's door or commit suicide. Their only hope of survival was to integrate into the organization's combat system. Women only knew how to give birth, and a small portion of men would become stallions, constantly mating with women to reproduce, while the rest would become higher-level cannon fodder. It could be said that the history and civilization of the Harlesians had been wiped out. They had no future, no hope, and there was no so-called beautiful tomorrow. After watching the last Harlesian being violently thrown into the transport ship by the clone soldiers, Zhang Cheng shrunk his body and came to the front of a huge crystal pillar at the center of the planet's extreme north. He narrowed his eyes and carefully observed the ancient words engraved on the stone slab beside it. As one of the greatest life forms in the universe, the Titan, he did not need any translation and could easily read the symbols on it. Just as expected, in the distant past, the Harlesians, who were still in the era of eating raw meat and drinking blood, discovered this place by chance and saw it as a gift from God, establishing a primitive religion and belief system. Through prayer and research day and night, some religious believers gradually discovered that they could use a certain method to make this huge crystal pillar release a super energy wave that resonated with a specific target, turning all matter into a state of high-energy particles. Thus, the Harlesians used this crystal pillar as their trump card and continuously attacked enemies that threatened them. In the end, they successfully climbed to the top and became the only intelligent race on the dark planet that had survived to this day. And the method to control the crystal pillar was precisely the mysterious connection between strings, matter, and energy. Interesting. The universe's dimensions are connected by strings. Not only can it break the narrow understanding of time, space, matter, and energy, it can also restore all matter and energy to their most primitive state. It's no wonder that controlling a main string means that one has limitless energy and resources. Just as Zhang Cheng was muttering to himself while rubbing his chin, the mother, who only had half of its body left, struggled to crawl over from afar and shouted with a trembling voice, Save me. Don't abandon me. Hmm? You're not dead yet. Zhang Cheng turned around and raised his eyebrows in surprise. According to the data given by the mothership's detector, this guy was almost hit by the Harleson's eye at that time, and the probability of surviving was estimated to be no more than 0.5%. I'm still alive. Don't let me die. I don't want to die. I can create an army for you. An invincible army. The mother's eyes widened, revealing a strong desire to live. Sorry. To me, you're just a disposable consumable. I don't plan on keeping something too dangerous by my side. If I'm not wrong, you should have Aria's memories in your mind, as well as a strong hatred for me, right? Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile, leaving behind a highly dangerous scourge. He was not that stupid. Making full use of it and directly destroying it was the smart thing to do. Chapter 10:16. No, you can't do this to me. I'm still useful. I'm still useful. You won't give up on something of great value. The mother obviously realized what her ending was and began to roar crazily. As an artificially synthesized high-level life form, she subconsciously retained the survival instinct of the original mother, which was to do her best to survive. For a normal life form, nothing was stronger than the desire to live. This kind of intensity far exceeded rationality and emotion, and was deeply hidden in the depths of all kinds of complex thoughts. It would only be instantly activated when certain conditions were met, causing them to completely abandon rationality and embrace bestiality. This was because only bestiality would allow a life form that had originally adapted to a civilized environment to adapt to a harsh environment the fastest, killing competitors in a cruel and merciless way, and finally ensuring that they were the lucky ones to survive to the end. Zhang Cheng, who had personally created countless disasters and destruction, naturally understood what the mother's strong desire to survive meant. However, it was a pity that not only did he not show the slightest bit of sympathy or benevolence, but he also walked up with a cold smile and dug out the core that represented the life of a titan from the other party's chest. He casually tossed the broken star's soul into the dark and empty universe, while he slowly channeled a tremendous amount of energy into the dark planet through the crystal pillar. After a while, the planet began to react violently, and then it became smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller. In the end, it was compressed into a sphere the size of a tennis ball, but its mass and density surpassed any visible matter in the universe. The mysterious liquid that was rotating at high speed inside, it was unknown whether it was energy or matter. Feeling the close connection between this little thing and the main string that was emitting a dark light in the distance, Zhang Cheng could not help but curl the corners of his mouth slightly. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Perfect. Time, space, energy, matter. Everything that makes up the universe is contained inside this small sphere. What I have to do next is to make it have a closer connection with the main string or even merge into one. This way, no matter where I go, as long as I hold this sphere in my hand, I can continuously draw power from the main string." As soon as he finished speaking, a small spaceship equipped with a communication system quickly came in front of him, and the voice of the clone adjutant was clearly transmitted through the communication device. "Sir Commander, 6th Dimension Universe, C-1240 area, Purge Agreement completed. Target eliminated. Please confirm the end of the mission." "Yes." Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. "The Purge Agreement is over. Commander confirmed. In addition, I also want to inform you that your use of the Purge Agreement in a specific area has been judged as an extremely dangerous and crazy decision. Now, all the important members, including the initiators, are gathered in the conference room, waiting for you to explain the mission." "Mission description? Why didn't I know that there was such a bureaucratic procedure in the organization?" Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. Needless to say, he had always liked to act in secret. What he hated the most was people hiding in the dark and watching his every move, and he hated to tell others his thoughts and plans. There was no other way. Selfishness is part of human nature. It was also the dark side of human nature. Although he had joined the organization in name, he had no intention of joining it. On the contrary, he merely treated the organization as a springboard, a channel to obtain more knowledge and strength. It was no different from what he had done in the past. Sorry, your action this time almost turned the surrounding hundreds of thousands of light years into a death zone that cannot be approached. Many people hope that you can give an accurate explanation and prove that you are not risking the future of the organization. The clone adjutant quickly conveyed the order from the other side. Oof. A bunch of idiots who don't even understand the nature of energy. It seems that they don't understand at all that there is a huge difference between energy and energy. Zhang Cheng sneered sarcastically, then carefully put away the shrunken dark planet. He quickly returned to the mothership and passed through the base connected to the main string. The moment he pushed open the door and walked into the conference room, countless pairs of eyes immediately stared at him, and there was no lack of hostile gazes. It was very obvious that his use of the Purge Agreement this time had angered many people, especially those who were not easy to deal with. Fortunately, the initiators did not seem to have any intention of pursuing this matter. With a faint smile on his face, he lightly patted the table and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "All right, since the main character is back, let's get him to give us an explanation. Remember, no one is allowed to interrupt him while he is speaking. Otherwise, I will treat it as a provocation against the rules of the organization." Thank you. Zhang Cheng was not a fool. He understood that the other party was expressing their support for him. He swept a meaningful glance at the members present. After a full minute, he calmly explained, "I understand that some of you think that my use of the Purge Agreement is a dangerous move, or even a gamble. But in reality, that's not the case. As everyone knows, the stellar-level main cannons on the main battleships use energy to propel high-energy particles to create a violent impact on the target, causing great damage. Its terrifying power is even enough to penetrate the Earth's crust in one shot, instantly tearing most planets into pieces. But what you don't understand is that the dark planet's body is a special energy crystallized celestial body produced by the resonance of the main string. The impact of high-energy particles is unable to cause any damage to it. On the contrary, the energy that maintains the gravitational and magnetic field changes within the celestial body is enough to form a weak layer of isolation on the surface. The damage caused by the impact of high-energy particles is far less than the damage caused by swinging a hammer. It is precisely because of this that I dare to use the Purge Agreement to indiscriminately attack the entire surface of the planet, drawing out the secret weapon of the Harlesians and capturing it in one fell swoop. That's right. The dark planet itself is the legendary Harleson's Eye. Based on my speculations, it is equivalent to a key that can truly activate the main string's full power. As long as we have this key, we can completely weaponize the main string and not just treat it as a passageway or a supply base. Interesting theory, but what do you have to prove your theory in deduction? The initiator stroked his chin and asked with interest. Zhang Cheng replied with a smile. Do you still remember the reason why the organization recruited me? You need an expert in energy, mysticism, and alchemy, and I just happen to be an expert in this field. Energy is a very complicated thing. It is not like what you think, where it is just a simple difference in external appearance. Every type of energy represents the ultimate law that maintains the stability of the universe. They are the manifestation of the law. Chapter 10:17. What was energy? According to the relatively primitive definition of physics on Earth, the so-called essence of energy was a measurement of the movement of matter. Of course, this was only the limit of human basic scientific knowledge. It did not cover the complexity and breadth of energy in the true sense. In the vast and boundless universe, there was only one thing that could be everywhere, and that was energy. That was right. Even if matter could not ensure that it existed in every corner of the multiverse, energy could. In this regard, Zhang Qing knew more than any other member present. He was even a person favored by the rules of death. In fact, after confirming the true appearance of the dark planet hidden under the soil layer, he realized that the bombardment of the main battleship would not cause too much damage. Similarly, it would not trigger the resonance between the huge energy crystal and the main string. So, you activated the purge agreement after careful consideration? The initiator tapped the table lightly and scanned the conference room with a scrutinizing gaze. In particular, a few of the most noisy fellows received special attention. That's right, and I even brought back this. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng took out the dark planet that had been compressed to the extreme. Through manipulating the gravitational and magnetic fields, he made this dazzling little thing float in midair. Instantly, countless pairs of eyes were firmly attracted by that dazzling radiance. Shock, curiosity, desire, greed. In an instant, all kinds of complicated and intense emotions emerged at the same time. Any member with more experience understood what the main string meant to the entire universe. However, the problem was that they had not been able to find a way to directly weaponize it. But now, from this high-pressure crystal that could condense countless amounts of energy, they could sense a pulse that resonated with the main string. Coupled with the previous encounter of the expedition fleet on the dark planet, they were even more certain of the incomparable value of this extremely beautiful little thing. After a full 10 minutes, the initiator stood up and exclaimed loudly, "Unbelievable! Rejoice, my brothers and sisters! Our youngest newcomer has brought a huge surprise to the organization. Please remember this moment. It means that we have finally walked out of confusion and darkness and are about to step into an incomparably bright future." Really? Is this thing so important? A male member frowned and raised a different opinion. One had to know that according to the rules of the organization, even the initiators were not much higher in status than the other members. Anything that involved important matters had to be decided by voting, and every member had the right to question each other. In short, this conference room was like a place for all kinds of suggestions and even arguments. It was not surprising that there were opponents. Sorry, I don't want to discuss this topic with someone who doesn't understand the nature of energy at all. It's like playing the lute to a cow. Even if I say something, you won't understand. Zhang Cheng stared into the other party's eyes, his tone revealing undisguised contempt. Although many of these people were experts in their own fields of expertise, they were complete laymen when it came to energy. They still regarded energy as a concept in the field of physics instead of standing on a higher level to understand what energy represented in the universe. The man was obviously not convinced. He gritted his teeth and retorted, "How do you know that I won't understand?" Zhang Cheng could not help but laugh and shake his head when he heard this. See, by asking such a question, it shows that you lack knowledge in the field of energy. You can't differentiate between the types of energy, and you're still in the early stages of the transformation between matter and energy. But the truth is that although energy and matter have an extremely close relationship, a small part of it exists independently most of the time. This is the field of mysticism that you guys have never touched upon. What are you trying to say? Forget it. Instead of talking about too many boring theories, why don't I let you see the embodiment of the ultimate law of the entire universe with your own eyes? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng suddenly stretched out his right hand without warning and placed it in front of the other party's face. A black, fog-like energy slowly emerged from the center of his palm. In the blink of an eye, a healthy arm was visibly aging at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally rotting away and dying. This phenomenon, which completely went against the common sense of science and physics, undoubtedly aroused the interest of some people. In particular, the woman who had joined forces to strengthen the maternal body walked up quickly and grabbed the withered and dead arm. Her eyes shone as she muttered to herself, "Unbelievable. Every cell has reached the limit of division." Then it died a natural death. Is this the power of death magic in the legends? We've conquered many magical planets in the past, but no one has ever been able to do this. Death is one of the embodiments of the ultimate law of the universe. Death energy is the embodiment of the law of death. Sometimes it's also called negative energy. It's the opposite of life energy. How about it? Can you use those scientific theories to explain it? No. The answer is obviously no. So please let go of your arrogance and prejudice and reevaluate the entire universe. In my opinion, there's still many secrets hidden behind the strings. It's not as simple as creating matter and energy, Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. As for the male member who had lost an arm, he directly tore it off and threw it aside. His eyes shone with a strange light. For an organization that had climbed to an extremely high level of technology, getting a new arm was as easy as eating and drinking. It was not worth paying attention to at all. What really interested him was the feeling of invading his body at that moment. Seeing that Zhang Cheng had almost convinced all the members present, the initiator immediately clapped his hands and announced, "I think that's all for the explanation of activating the purge agreement within the range of the main string. Next, let's discuss how we should deal with this dark planet that has been compressed to the extreme." Is there a need to discuss this? Of course, it's stored in the base as a trump card for the organization's external expansion. The man with only one arm expressed his attitude directly. There was no need to ask to know that he was definitely using his position to avenge a personal grudge. He intended to use this opportunity to make Zhang Cheng lose the biggest and most precious reward of this mission. What do you think? The initiator's attitude was rather ambiguous. He neither agreed nor disagreed. Instead, he threw out the problem in front of everyone. Zhang Cheng had undoubtedly expected this situation. He replied with a faint smile, "No problem. I completely agree. But I have to remind you that if you want to activate its power, you have to have a very precise level of energy control. I don't think there's anyone other than me who can do it." Chapter 10:18. Confidence? Conceit? Everyone in the conference room had a strange expression on their faces, and then they looked at the initiator. Anyone who was not a fool could understand the subtext of the sentence just now, which was, "This thing belongs to me, and no one can take it away from me." There was a clear rule within the organization that all important things discovered during external expansion had to be returned to the public, and they would vote to decide who to hand over to for research or safekeeping. But now, a newcomer was trying to use his advantages in the field of expertise to break the rules and even establish his own position within the organization, reestablishing his position and advantages. Needless to say, in most well-structured organizations, this kind of behavior was absolutely naked provocation, and it was a taboo that was not allowed. But what was interesting was that the initiator didn't seem displeased at all. Instead, she smiled and nodded. "Since that's the case, I'll let you keep it for now. I hope you won't let me down." "Of course. I never disappoint people. You're not like some trash who only knows how to talk big, and when faced with difficulties, you'll shrink your head like a tortoise and hide yourself in a sturdy tortoise shell, shivering in fear." Zhang Cheng did not give any face to these so-called parallel universes of himself at all, and he sneered and mocked. Cold, arrogant, antisocial, vengeful. He used practical actions to prove what kind of person he was, and at the same time, he also made those who were hostile to him understand the consequences of provoking him. Obviously, these words instantly offended more than half of the members present. In particular, the commander of the expeditionary fleet from last time suddenly had an extremely ugly expression, and the anger in his eyes was almost about to burst out. "Very good. I hope you can do what you say. Now, I announce the end of the meeting." The initiator did not seem to notice the tense atmosphere around him. He stood up and walked outside. Before he left, he did not forget to give Zhang Cheng a look, indicating that he should follow him. The two of them walked along the flat corridor for more than 10 minutes before the initiator, whose age could not be determined at all, stopped. He turned around and said in a slightly playful tone, "I can feel that you are a very special kind of person, a madman who has completely abandoned his humanity and is swallowed by darkness in his heart. If you don't mind, can you tell me the real purpose of you joining the organization?" "Oh, why do you ask?" Zhang Cheng didn't answer immediately. Instead, he probed carefully, towards those who were stronger than him. He had always maintained a cautious and humble attitude, although this was a bit suspicious of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. In fact, everyone subconsciously had the consciousness of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. It was just that some people showed it more obviously, while others showed it more subtly. Ha ha! Look, your reaction just proved my guess. Relax, in a way, we are all the same. Why do you think I created this organization? Conquer the universe? No, only a fool would do something so senseless. I want eternity. Eternity in the truest sense. An eternity that would not die even if the universe was destroyed. Can you understand? The initiator laughed and revealed the secret in his heart. But unfortunately, Zhang Cheng didn't believe a single word. He just pretended to agree. I understand. Of course, he understood. This is no different from my pursuit of transcendence. But I have always had a question. Since the start of the Great Flux War, you haven't met a true opponent, right? Ah, you noticed it. That's good. You have to know that many idiots foolishly believe that we're the only ones in the entire universe who have discovered the secret of strings, so conquering the universe is only a matter of time. But the truth is that we have many enemies, so many that it is unimaginable. Moreover, in this unimaginable battle, we are not the strongest. On the contrary, we are the weakest. As he said that, the initiator took out a sphere made of an unknown substance that looked like countless threads and lightly threw it above his head. The next second, this ball of thread seemed to have been activated and disintegrated at a speed that was indiscernible to the naked eye, finally forming a huge three-dimensional image. To be more precise, it was a star map of the high-dimensional universe. He pointed at the area marked in red and said, "This is the area under our control. Next to the blue area is the Pagoda Alliance Empire, a colossus with a long history and rich experience in the Great Flux War. According to the current situation, it won't be long before we begin our first contact, and then it will be a battle to the death. Believe me, when you see their strength with your own eyes, you will understand how terrifying and cruel the Great Flux War is." So, Zhang Cheng shrugged, showing an indifferent expression. Fight to the death with an undefeatable enemy? Sorry, that was not something he would do. If the situation really reached that point, he did not mind running away at all or turning around and joining the enemy's camp. As for loyalty, courage, trust, hot-bloodedness, and other touching positive emotions, they had long been separated from his soul. The initiator undoubtedly sensed Zhang Cheng's inner thoughts, and the corner of his mouth slightly raised into a mocking smile. You think you can stay out of this? What? Will they chase me to the end of the universe? No, they don't need to chase you to the end of the universe. They only need to lock down everything around the battlefield, and when the time comes, you won't even have the chance to escape. Remember, losing the Great Flux War means death, eternal death. There will be no forgiveness, no captives, and even less acceptance of surrender. Both sides will bet everything just to stand at the peak of the universe. Perhaps you don't believe me now, but the moment you step into the battlefield, you will understand the true meaning of these words. Work hard to become stronger. You don't have much time left. After saying this meaningful sentence, the initiator walked toward the stairs leading to the higher levels without looking back. Watching his figure gradually disappear into the distance, Zhang Cheng touched his chin and muttered to himself, "The true Great Flux War? That sounds really exciting. Looks like I have to seize the time and expand my strength to the greatest extent to ensure that I don't become a pathetic cannon fodder." As soon as he finished speaking, Old Chin suddenly appeared behind him and asked with a solemn expression, "The initiator told you about the war?" "That's right. What? Are you also one of the people who knows?" Zhang Qing nodded and asked in return, "Yes. Including you, the entire organization already has 20 people who know about it. Be prepared, the cruel war is coming soon. For each and every one of us, this is a test, a cruel trial. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I will make sure that I can survive." Chapter 1019. Knowing that a war was inevitable, Zhang Qing quickly left the headquarters and returned to the mothership alone. He led the remaining fleet to exploit the entire C-1240 area by destroying and plundering, maximizing resources, energy, and endless cannon fodder. He did not hesitate to use tens of thousands of races as experimental subjects to carry out bloody and cruel engulfment experiments, creating a large number of irrational biological weapons with abnormally powerful individual combat capabilities. In just a few decades, hundreds of millions of planets with life in this star field had all disappeared, replaced by a group of biological weapons that only knew how to kill and destroy. In addition, he also extracted all the stellar energy in the area under his control and stored it firmly in his body in case of an emergency. With the growing strength of the Alliance, news finally came from the border that more than thousands of outposts had lost contact overnight. Obviously, the Pagoda Alliance's Vanguard fleet had begun to test the strength of the organization and then decide what kind of attack strategy to adopt. At the same time, more than two-thirds of the people in the organization had not realized how powerful the enemy they were facing this time. They still maintained a calm and leisurely state, thinking that nothing in the entire universe could really threaten them. It was not until the first expeditionary fleet officially appeared on the detector that the hundreds of members in the base suddenly woke up from their sleep and began to quarrel and discuss endlessly. Of course, none of this had anything to do with Zhang Cheng, because he was sitting in the mothership command center of the huge fleet of the moment, staring at the three-dimensional projection in front of him with interest. After a while, he asked, "This is the Pagoda Alliance? Their battleships don't look very advanced." "Don't be careless. This is just a Vanguard fleet, not equipped with their most advanced weapons, and we also did not find any high-end combat power named hero." The initiator stood aside and took the initiative to remind him. It had to be said. At this time, instead of staying in the base to clean up the mess, he came here to observe the first contact battle. His motives were definitely suspicious. Hero? What's that? Zhang Cheng keenly grasped the key word. To be honest, he felt that it was not normal for the initiator to know so much about the Pagoda Alliance. He must be hiding many unknown secrets. Hero is a kind of biological weapon that directly sends living things into the main string, and through a series of complex and mysterious methods, it becomes a destructive biological weapon. If you have to use a quantifier to describe it, a hero can easily destroy 10 such expeditionary fleets. Believe me, when you see them slaughtering and scrupulously on the battlefield with your own eyes, you will understand that my description is not the slightest bit exaggerated. The initiator explained meaningfully. I see. Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. So now, what I have to do is to stop this fleet without exposing my trump card, right? Yes. This is a test. Don't let them collect any useful data. Cannon fodder had always been something that could be obtained as much as one wanted. The true high-end combat power and trump cards were the most precious. Because of this, of course, there are only 20 people in the entire organization, and you were the last one. Let's not forget, I have high expectations of you. All right, enough with the nonsense. It's time for you to perform. After saying this, the initiator left a strange smile, then turned around and disappeared into the huge beam of light that connected to the main string. Performance? Yes, I will give you a wonderful performance that will be unforgettable for a lifetime. Polak, is your legion ready? Zhang Cheng looked back at his loyal subordinate with sharp eyes. The Doomsday Lord, who had devoured more than tens of thousands of higher life forms, grinned and replied, "Of course, great master. The Legion is at your command at any time." Very good. Zhang Cheng nodded with satisfaction. Let's move. Let those guys who only know how to hide under women's skirts see what a truly invincible Legion is, and what the cunning, coldness, and cruelty of the demons are. As you wish. Polak knelt on one knee and patted his chest hard. The next second, he raised his right hand and released a dark light. In an instant, the demons, who were originally waiting for battle, entered a state of level 1 combat readiness. The huge fleet ignited their engines and headed straight for the enemy's area. Since both sides didn't conceal their presence, they quickly collided head-on. When the long-range weapons entered the range, dazzling high-energy particle beams illuminated the dark universe. After the first round of crossfire, thousands of battleships exploded on the spot, like huge fireworks, cruel and beautiful. As for the people inside and the land combat units on board, they naturally became space garbage floating in the universe with the explosion. There was no sound. There was only a picture of blood and fire. Some military experts once said that the reason why naval warfare was more terrible and cruel than land warfare was that the Marines on board had almost no way to escape, especially when the gunpowder depot was hit and exploded. Often, a whole ship of people would die. Even if they were lucky enough to jump into the sea, they usually wouldn't last long and would be swallowed by the merciless sea. But now, this space war was 10,000 times more terrible than naval warfare. After all, there was no air in space, and the temperature was close to minus 270 degrees Celsius. Anyone who was hit by the main cannon had a 100% chance of surviving. They would either suffocate to death or be frozen into ice. However, the commanders of both sides obviously didn't care about the life and death of the cannon fodder, allowing the space battleships to explode around them. When the distance was close to the critical point, the spellcasters of the new Burning Legion activated the random teleportation gate that they had prepared for a long time at the fastest speed. In just a few minutes, the endless demon army jumped across the dark space and directly appeared inside the enemy's battleships. Of course, some accidentally teleported to outer space and were directly blown into dust by the intensive bombardment. But for the direction of the entire war, this was undoubtedly a successful boarding and was an expected loss. On the contrary, for the enemy, it was definitely an out-and-out great surprise. More than half of the warships soon came to a standstill, and some of them even changed their direction and aimed at their own people around them and shot crazily, disrupting the previously evenly matched situation by brute force. Through the battlefield projection, Zhang Cheng could clearly see that the situation had suddenly become favorable to his side. He chuckled and muttered to himself, "Let me see your trump card, Pagoda Alliance Empire. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to reveal your trump card." Chapter 10:20. Just as the enemy fleet was about to be wiped out, the door at the top of the mothership at the rear suddenly opened. A strange creature with dark blue skin and a flat head slowly walked out. He glanced at the approaching battleships, and then his whole body suddenly swelled, turning into a giant covered in a terrifying biological field. The giant opened his arms, and a strong dark blue light emitted from his chest. Instantly, everything around him was frozen. Time, space, energy, matter. At this moment, it was as if the entire universe was in a state of absolute stillness. The next second, more than half of the battleships suddenly shattered, turning into countless tiny particles that scattered in all directions. Hero, Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly shrank. There was no doubt that the combat power of this strange life form was beyond the scope of what most people could understand. Its terrifying ability was definitely not something that could be described with words. While he was in a daze, the initiator's excited voice suddenly sounded from the communicator. "Capture him. Bring him back alive." "Oh, are you sure? To capture this guy alive, I have to use that thing." Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and asked, "Use it. Use whatever trump card you want. This guy is a hero. If we can capture him, we can figure out the nature and weakness of the hero's power." The initiator gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. From his tone, it was not difficult to determine that the giant in front of him was the most powerful combat unit of the Pagoda Alliance Empire, and it was also likely to be the commander of this expedition fleet. "Okay, I'll try my best." There was no hesitation. Zhang Cheng directly took out the dark planet that had been compressed to the limit, and with his powerful control of energy, he began to try to trigger the resonance between it and the main string. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, the crystal that contained a huge amount of energy trembled violently, and at the same time released a dazzling light. Such an amazing energy reaction, of course, it was impossible not to attract the enemy's attention. The giant hero standing in space suddenly abandoned the remaining battleships, turned into a dark blue arc, and rushed over at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. Beep, 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 beep. Warning, warning. A high-energy creature is rapidly approaching. All members, please enter the nearest escape pod. A violent collision is expected in 15 seconds. With the ear-piercing alarm echoing in their ears, everyone on the mothership could not help but reveal a horrified expression. Only Zhang Cheng remained unmoved and continued to strengthen the resonance range. Just as the dark blue arc was about to collide with the mothership, he suddenly opened his eyes and gently pushed the dark planet forward. Clang! The transparent barrier of the mothership shattered on the spot. At the same time, the enemies who were rushing forward were also blocked by a layer of invisible force field, and a dazzling red light burst out. What was even more frightening was that this force field was not only used for defense, but also wrapped around the hero of the Pagoda Alliance Empire at an extremely fast speed. No matter how the hero struggled, no matter how he used his powerful ability, he could not break free. About half an hour later, countless tiny strings extended from the inside of the energy crystal and tied up the captive like a rice dumpling. The remaining fleets also took this opportunity to destroy the few remaining enemy ships, ending this battle of probing each other's strength. Zhang Cheng ignored his cannon fodder and went to the most valuable captive. He asked with great interest through the spiritual connection, "You are the hero of the Pagoda Alliance Empire? Can you tell me, how did you obtain the ability to rapidly expand and freeze everything around you?" "Humph. You will pay for what you have done." "Stupid guy. The Empire is invincible." The captive obviously had no interest in answering any questions, and his eyes revealed a cold light. Well, it seems that you want to keep the secret of your faction. It doesn't matter. I have many ways to pry open your mouth. Even if you're dead, we can still get a lot of useful information from your corpse." Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. "No, you won't get anything. I promise." The captive did not back down. "Don't be so sure. There are infinite possibilities in the universe. From an objective point of view, the so-called absolutely does not exist. Let's go. The leader of our organization wants to see you. Maybe he has already prepared a sumptuous meal for you." After saying that, Zhang Cheng grabbed the dark planet and dragged it directly into the huge beam of light of the main string, returning to the gap between the two-dimensional and three-dimensional universes. When he appeared at the teleportation point of the base, he found himself surrounded by his counterparts from the parallel universes. After a short silence, the initiator took the lead and applauded. As he applauded, he did not forget to praise loudly, "Well done. You have brought us a glorious victory. With this precious captive, the organization will soon find some ways to restrain the hero." "Thank you, but you should understand that what I want is not this useless nonsense." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and replied meaningfully, "I know. According to the rules of the organization, meritorious deeds will be rewarded and wrongdoings will be punished. No one will forget your contributions. I swear, I will give you a satisfactory answer later. But for now, let's hurry up and get the most important information from him." The initiator impatiently looked at the strange-looking hero. His eyes were so terrifying that everyone present could not help but show a pitiful expression. What awaited this unlucky guy was the most terrifying and cruel experiment, 10,000 times more terrible than death. After getting the answer he wanted, Zhang Cheng immediately handed the hero over to the initiator, allowing him to be dragged into the base's underground research room like a dead dog. There were also more than 20 professionals in various fields. Not long after, heart-wrenching screams echoed throughout the entire base. The heroes of the Pagoda Alliance had been greatly strengthened and modified. In order to increase their combat power to the limit, they had even cut off the pain nerves of every hero. But the organization was not to be trifled with. Not only did they restore the nervous system to its original state, they also designed many instruments that directly targeted the soul. Under unparalleled pain and torture, the captive's mental defenses quickly collapsed. His brain was like a library that was open to his enemy. Through reading his memories, a large number of secrets about the Pagoda Alliance and the heroes were revealed little by little. Chapter 1021. For an entire month, this unknown and pitiful captive was immersed in endless pain almost every moment. He could not even commit suicide, even if he wanted to. After squeezing out his last bit of memory and remaining value, the initiators finally obtained the method to create heroes that they had been dreaming of, as well as their greatest weakness. Simply put, a hero was to connect the will of an intelligent life form with the main string, forming a kind of biological resonance, allowing it to bear part of the power of the main string. However, the disadvantage was that the energy stored in the hero's body was limited. Once the energy was exhausted, it had to return to the main string to replenish it. Moreover, when every main string was connected to a hero, it could not create a second hero. This also meant that the number of high-end heroes of the Pagoda Alliance should not exceed the number of main strings they controlled. Perhaps the reason why the Superstring War was called this was because all the battles revolved around the huge pillars of light. Every organization thirsted for more, and in essence it still did not break away from the scope of fighting for resources. However, this did not have much to do with Zhang Cheng. After obtaining the method to create a hero, he returned to the main string of the star field under his rule alone and methodically made preparations to create a hero. As for the candidate, it was naturally himself. To be more precise, he was preparing to fuse stellar-level titans, heroes, and dark planets that had been compressed to the extreme into one, attempting to seize the power of the main string to the greatest extent possible, thus becoming the unparalleled ruler of the multiverse. However, it was obviously not an easy thing to do. In particular, the Pagoda Alliance's method of creating heroes only had less than a tenth of the success rate. This also meant that there was a 90% chance that Zhang Cheng would be crushed into particles that could not be distinguished by the naked eye during the process of compression of the huge amount of energy and matter. Therefore, it was definitely impossible to copy the original method. It had to be improved and tested countless times. Master, we've prepared everything according to your request. The succubus Queen Ren twisted her alluring body and habitually bent down slightly, revealing her unfathomable cleavage. Because she had swallowed and fused with a large number of high-dimensional life forms, she had already shed her originally ugly demonic wings and goat-like hooves. Other than the strange light purple color of her skin, she was no different from a human. Very good. What about the experimental subjects? Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and asked without turning his head. You don't have to worry about that. I've already found 5,000 soldiers who are willing to become experimental subjects. Ren's lips curved beautifully, and a cruel smile appeared on her beautiful face. Even a fool would understand that the so-called willingness for demons was actually coercion, enticement, and coercion. In the eyes of high-level demon lords, low-level demons were at best cannon fodder, servants, and consumables. If you don't go up now, what's the point of having you around? Of course, in Zhang Cheng's eyes, high-level demons were essentially no different from cannon fodder. He nodded indifferently and ordered, "In that case, let's begin. Remember, during the experiment, all unrelated personnel should stay as far away as possible. I can't guarantee what kind of terrifying chain reaction will be triggered if it fails. Rest assured, my benevolent master, no one would joke around with their lives." After saying that, Ren knelt down and kissed Zhang Cheng's shoes affectionately before turning and disappearing at the end of the channel of the mothership. After a short 5 minutes, the huge fleet quickly set sail and retreated a considerable distance at the fastest speed. When they arrived at the safe area, before the star-like engine was shut down, the main string in the distance suddenly released an indescribable energy impact. This impact triggered a chain reaction of the ubiquitous dark matter in the universe. The originally dark universe suddenly became so bright that people could not open their eyes. The energy shields on the surface of many battleships collapsed under the sudden rotation of this dark matter, and some of the smaller battleships even disintegrated on the spot. When the strong light gradually dissipated, Zhang Cheng discovered that the entire range of dozens of light years from the main string had become a huge black hole celestial body. It was like a black sphere that kept rotating around the main string. Such a shocking scene made him squint his eyes and mutter to himself, "Unbelievable! Is this the result of weaponizing the main string? If I was in the center just now, would I be able to survive safely? As soon as he finished speaking, Rin rushed in from outside in a sorry state and shouted with a frightened face, "Master, the experiment failed. More than 500 Arita warlocks and 3,000 succubus shadow sorcerers are all dead. Even their souls did not escape." It's expected. There's nothing to be surprised about. Be quiet. I'm thinking about an important decision. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. Life is priceless. Sorry, this is just a beautiful wish of the people at the bottom. In reality, the situation was the opposite. Not only was life valuable, but it was also very cheap in some war-torn areas. The treatment after death was even worse than that of dogs in developed areas. At the very least, when a dog died, its owner would be sad. There might even be groups or individuals who would jump out in the name of caring for animals, fabricating one or two touching stories to earn the cheap tears of the kind and ignorant people. Understood. Rin hurriedly bowed and carefully stood aside to maintain her silence. Through the disastrous result just now, she more or less understood what her master wanted to do and how dangerous this matter was. She was afraid that she would accidentally become the next victim. Fortunately, Zhang Cheng was now focused on the data recorded by the mothership's detector, constantly adjusting and fixing the errors. He did not care about the succubus queen's thoughts. After a full 18 hours, he threw the new deployment map to the other party and straightforwardly ordered, "Go. Prepare for another experiment. This time, choose an abyssal lord as the test subject. Tell them that if the experiment succeeds, the participants will obtain power 1,000,000 times stronger than what they have now." 1,000,000 times? Ren's eyes immediately shone with a greedy light. Yes, 1,000,000 times. But if it fails, you know the consequences. Zhang Cheng replied meaningfully. "Oh, damn it. I'll leave this opportunity to those hot-tempered idiots." Ren hurriedly chased the idea of participating in the experiment out of her mind and quickly fled the central control room of the mothership. Obtaining great power was something to be happy about, but if it was risking her life, then forget it. Apart from the abyssal lords whose minds were filled with thoughts of slaughter, destruction, and destruction, no other demons would choose to risk their lives to obtain greater power. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1022. While Zhang Cheng was busy with his research on the Trinity, the initiator was standing in front of an experimental subject that had completely transformed into a giant in the research lab at the bottom of the base. "How is it?" he asked with a smile. "How is it? How is it?" "Pretty good. Apart from the permanent damage to the brain and soul, the rest of the body's data is almost the same as the heroes of the Pagoda Alliance." The researcher with the plain glasses replied happily. "Then how long will it take before we can create our own heroes?" The initiator immediately asked. It's a bit hard to say. Maybe a few days, maybe a few months, but it won't take more than a year. However, I have to remind you that the greatest danger of creating such a powerful individual is that he has his own independent thoughts and will almost never be restricted by others. Once he betrays you, the consequences will be disastrous. The researcher reminded with uncertainty. The initiator nodded thoughtfully. "Don't worry, I'll choose the right person." "Oh, by the way, what has our rookie, who has contributed so much, been up to recently?" "Him? From what I know, he seems to be carrying out a crazy experiment. He plans to combine himself with the heroes of the Dark Planet and the Pagoda Alliance to become a main-string controller." When he said this, the researcher's face showed a mixture of contempt and disdain. The reason was simple. In his eyes, this experiment with a success rate of almost 0 was a waste of time and energy. There was nothing to be gained. Moreover, even if the research was successful, would the other party be willing to risk his life for a 1/10 or even lower chance of success? "What, you don't think he'll succeed?" the initiator asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. The researcher replied without thinking. "Yes, I admit that he is a rare genius in some aspects, and he doesn't lack courage or creativity. However, the problem is that his ambition is too great, so great that he doesn't know the limits of his power." "Ha ha! You're underestimating the courage of our new member. Did you know? When he was at his craziest, he even used himself as a test subject many times, just to obtain power that surpassed everything. Indeed, as many people in the organization think, he is an incomparably crazy person. However, don't forget that he has never failed. Isn't a madman who has never failed scary? The initiator laughed as he spoke of the most frightening aspect of Zhang Chong. Indeed, a madman wasn't scary. However, if it was someone who had brushed shoulders with death several times and didn't die, instead becoming stronger and stronger, that was a bit chilling. So you think he's a threat? The researcher subconsciously frowned. No, the initiator hurriedly shook his head. At least before we defeat the Pagoda Alliance, he's not a threat. Not only is he not a threat, but he's also a powerful ally. As for after defeating the Pagoda Alliance, there's no need to think about it for now. You were one of the people who escaped from the Pagoda Alliance with me. You should know how powerful they are. The researcher gently rubbed his eyebrows and sighed with a bitter smile. Sigh. Of course I know how powerful the Pagoda Alliance is. Back then, our mother planet was captured by their huge fleet in an instant, and then 99% of the population was killed, leaving only 1% of the top scientific talents. Among the tens of thousands of top talents, only you and I didn't forget the hatred from back then, and took the opportunity to rebel and escape. That's right, for revenge. What that ambitious newcomer wants to do isn't important. What's important is that he will fight side by side with us and destroy one of the most powerful organizations in the universe. The initiator raised his right hand and clenched it into a fist. But what about you in those parallel universes? They should know your true goal, right? The researcher adjusted his glasses and said with a hint of sarcasm, "It doesn't matter if they know or not, because as an avatar, I have supreme control over most of them. As long as the time is right, I will devour them and become the most powerful version of myself." The initiator's eyes shone with a terrifying light. By killing yourself in a different dimension, you cause the string to vibrate, and then merge the small strings scattered in the corners of the universe into one, creating a main string out of thin air that is completely under your control. In a way, your madness isn't inferior to that newcomer's. Maybe even more. Maybe it's because of this that you admire him so much, isn't it? The researcher commented with a sigh. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? The initiator neither admitted nor denied it, only shrugging his shoulders. At the same time, far away on the other side of the universe, the Pagoda Alliance's huge expeditionary fleet was quickly gathering near a main string. At a glance, there were more of them than the sand on the beach, especially those ferocious and terrifying life-form battleships that looked like interstellar behemoths. At a glance, they looked like the insectoids in countless sci-fi movies, exuding an aura of death. Obviously, these big guys were not gathered for a party, but to discuss the upcoming all-out war. Through the probing attack not long ago, they already understood that the enemy this time was not easy to deal with, but was on the same level as them, an organization that had mastered the mysteries of the main string. Such a powerful opponent naturally had to be taken seriously. They had to strike with all their strength and wipe the enemy from the universe forever. Dozens of strange individuals with astonishing energy exuding from their bodies were now gathered in the conference room of a biological battleship, exchanging opinions through telepathy. They also did not forget to share the information sent back by the Vanguard fleet with every member. After an unknown amount of time, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe a few months, in short, when these strange guys with strange appearances left, the huge fleet docked around the main string finally moved, entering the huge light pillar one after another. In a situation that could not be explained by any theory or technology, they continuously entered the area controlled by Zhang Chong. As soon as this unprecedentedly huge fleet appeared, the detector transmitted the corresponding information back. For a moment, the atmosphere of the entire organization became extremely tense. All kinds of powerful weapons were taken out as if they were free, try to arm every unit that could fight as much as possible. Chapter 10:23. as both sides entered a state of full war mobilization. A large number of battleships began to gather in the border area, and the number was increasing every day, every hour, every minute, and even every second. In order to create as much cannon fodder as possible, they even plundered the planetary systems under their control in a destructive manner. Countless races, civilizations, stars, and planets simply vanished from the universe, turning into billions of war resources that were sent to the front lines without end. This was because everyone knew that in a war of this scale, strategies, and tactics were all illusory. Only raw strength was real. There was only one chance to determine the winner, and whoever could grasp it would become the real winner. When a number of fleets reached a certain number, the tentative attack finally began. With the main string as the base, the Pagoda Alliance took the lead in attacking. The huge fleet swarmed in a suicidal manner, rushing towards the iron bastion of defense. In just a short round of fighting, at least 30 million battleships exploded in the deep space, turning into worthless fragments and dust. However, to the most powerful force in the universe, such a loss was nothing. More and more fleets continued to follow up. No hesitation, no fear, and no rest. These guys used crazy attacks to make the members of the organization completely understand how aggrieved those galaxies and civilizations that were destroyed by them in the past were. The steel firmament system that was built in the periphery of the star field with great difficulty was originally expected to last for at least a month, but now it was gone in less than 3 days. And the other side's high-end combat strength hero never showed up from the beginning to the end, only relying on endless cannon fodder to launch continuous attacks. Such a terrifying war potential simply made people feel cold all over. That's right, cold all over. Because just from a number of cannon fodder, it was enough to judge that the Pagoda Alliance controlled a much larger universe, and it was even likely to be several times, 10 times, or even 100 times larger than them. The number of main strings was also very large. If the above was only a comparison from a quantitative point of view, then those seemingly cheap but extremely powerful biological battleships were definitely a hit to the head for those who specialized in the field of research. Perfect genetic modification, simple and violent energy storage and release method. There were also small biological weapons hidden inside. Once close, they would immediately jump out like crazy, aiming at the nearest enemy battleship and rushing to self-destruct. Advanced technology, a powerful weapon, all kinds of profound knowledge and technology. Therefore, these things that were once regarded as advantages by the internal members of the organization were as fragile as paper in front of the Pagoda Alliance empire. They were easily penetrated by the most simple and crude method. It was as if all the countries on Blue Planet were desperately developing high-speed fighter jets, stealth fighter jets, advanced missiles, and interception technology. But suddenly, a country appeared out of nowhere. It didn't play with stealth or missile technology. Instead, it learned from the World War II era and won by quantity. It built tens of billions of fighter jets in one go and rushed over in an overwhelming manner. It didn't care about missiles or defense systems. It was impossible to take down all of them. As long as half of them reached the battlefield, the enemy was doomed. Inside the command center of the huge space fortress, Zhang Cheng was admiring the holographic image of the battlefield sent back by the detector. At the same time, he was looking at the constantly changing expressions on everyone's faces with great interest. After a full minute, he lowered his voice and asked, "Are you sure you want to watch the situation deteriorate?" "Why not?" Old Chen's eyes flashed with a light that was completely different from his usual lazy state. "Don't forget, the organization is not a charity. Since you joined it, you have to make a corresponding contribution. What's more, the enemy's high-end combat power hasn't been deployed yet. If we attack first, won't we be at a disadvantage?" I understand. It seems that these technicians still have trump cards that they haven't shown yet. Well, it seems that it will take some time before the final battle starts. I'll go back to my mothership and stay there. After that, Zhang Cheng completely ignored the angry and strange looks of the people around him. He turned around and left. Not long after he left, the initiator came in from the outside. He first inspected the nervous and busy members, then frowned and asked, "Where did our ambitious newcomer go? Why didn't he stay here and wait for orders?" Him? Old Chin shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He went back to his mothership. "I think this guy hasn't given up on his crazy Trinity research. It's already this time. He's still doing research?" The initiator raised his eyebrows in surprise. It should be known that with the outbreak of a full-scale war, everyone in the organization was busy. Even the combat personnel were on standby 24 hours a day. They didn't dare to do anything else. But Zhang Cheng was still in a mood to do his dangerous research and experiments. You should know his personality. Crazy and conceited. Apart from death, nothing can stop him from evolving to a higher life form. I suggest that you don't add him to the list of the first batch of attacks for the time being. Don't worry, he wasn't part of the original plan. Also, inform everyone to get ready. In 72 hours, I plan to give these arrogant guys a big surprise. Oh? Are they going to attack? No, it's just a surprise attack. Let the Pagoda Alliance's commander not dare to send out cannon fodder so recklessly. At the same time, Zhang Cheng, who had returned to the mothership, was standing in front of the corpse of a Lord of the Abyss. Unlike ordinary Lords of the Abyss, this guy's body had exceeded the limits of what his genes and cells could bear. The surface of his body was covered with a layer of unknown armor, and his two eyes were constantly flashing with a cold light. Needless to say, this corpse was the unlucky guy who had died suddenly in an experiment not long ago. Compared to the previous one who had been directly crushed to a pulp, this one had obviously made great progress. At the very least, his body structure had begun to completely hero. But unfortunately, his spirit and soul had been torn apart by the terrifying energy shock. Sigh. Almost. Where did I go wrong? Zhang Cheng muttered to himself while stroking his chin. As for the fierce war that was going on outside, he wasn't worried at all. At least, before the initiator personally took action, he didn't have to worry about the tragic situation of being completely wiped out. Chapter 10:24. Master, are you still troubled by the failure of the experiment? Ren, the succubus queen, appeared out of nowhere and carefully stroked Zhang Cheng's chest from behind with her slender fingers. Although she knew very well that such provocative actions would not have any effect on a Titan, there were some things in her nature that could never be erased. Zhang Cheng did not mind this small offense, and said without turning his head, "Shouldn't I be troubled? Look at the fleets swarming outside and the powerful enemies that have yet to show themselves. Although this is not the most dangerous situation I've ever been in, it's not far from it. Feel the space and time around you." From the moment the battleships launched an all-out attack, everything was firmly locked by an inexplicable force. Do you know what this means? It means we can't escape. Ren's expression suddenly changed, and a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. That's right. Zhang Cheng nodded meaningfully. To be precise, we can't retreat through normal means. So we must win this battle, no matter what price we have to pay. And what's more important than defeating a powerful enemy than increasing our own strength? Understand? Don't worry, I'll immediately arrange for people to prepare for the third experiment. With that, the succubus queen did not bother to show her seductive image and quickly disappeared at the end of the mothership's passage. In contrast, Zhang Cheng was still standing in the same place with a calm expression. No one could figure out what he was thinking at this moment. Even the demons who had followed him for a long time only knew that their master must be secretly brewing a huge conspiracy. Just as everyone's eyes were focused on this battle that would determine the future of the universe, no one noticed that a small battleship parked outside the battlefield had directly entered the three-dimensional universe with the help of the power of the string at a speed that was almost invisible to the naked eye. It docked on the road of a primitive planet, and the name of this continent was the famous Westeros. With the sound of the hatch opening, a clone that looked exactly like Zhang Cheng's human form walked out and laughed at himself. I didn't expect that I would come back one day. Let's hope that Volini hasn't gone crazy yet. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. Obviously, he wanted to make use of the other party's ability to peek into fate and the future to to help him complete the Trinity experiment. In any case, Valeni's abilities were very special and powerful. Now was the time for him to show his strength. As for the enmity and conflict between the two of them, it was nothing in the face of benefits. At the very least, Zhang Cheng was confident that he could force him to submit, no matter how much the other party hated him. Search, positioning, teleportation. In less than a minute, Zhang Cheng appeared in front of Valeni, who had completely degenerated into a savage. He pretended to be surprised and shouted, "My God, how did you become like this?" It's you. Valeni's eyes were bloodshot when he saw who it was, and his body was trembling uncontrollably. Hunger, pain, torture. There was also an endless pursuit. All of these apocalyptic disasters were bestowed upon her by this evil man in front of her. He didn't immediately jump up and stab the other party's heart with the sword in his hand. This was already quite incredible self-control. "It's me, my dear friend. If it's convenient, can you tell me what happened?" Zhang Cheng pretended to be innocent and blinked. "Bah, you still have the nerve to ask." Valeni was obviously disgusted by his poor acting and spat fiercely. If he didn't know that this guy was just an insignificant clone and had far more magic power than himself, he would have already attacked. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly knew what was going on in the other party's mind. He said with a smile, "I think there may be a misunderstanding between us. I can explain. Of course, the premise is that you are willing to accept my kindness and help." "Kindness? Help? Are you trying to make me laugh?" "No, I won't trust you anymore. You are AF** king lunatic and pervert. No one else in the entire universe would be like you. Just for such a trivial matter, you would make such a crazy arrangement. Look into my eyes. Do you know how I survived all this time?" Valeni was obviously going all out. He unscrupulously cursed and turned the resentment in his heart into all kinds of filthy words, which kept coming out of his mouth. There was no other way. He couldn't beat him. Other than cursing, what else could he do? Anyway, he would just die. Instead of living on tenterhooks all day long, he might as well die and be done with it. Zhang Cheng just stood there and didn't show the slightest anger or annoyance from beginning to end. When the other party was tired of cursing, he smiled and asked, "Are you done?" Perhaps a strong talker or something like that could shine brightly in all kinds of literature and movies, constantly acting out all kinds of pretentious and face-slapping plots. However, in the cruel reality, apart from hurting the people closest to them, they would basically only make themselves angrier. Usually, he would use two methods to deal with verbal abuse. One was to completely ignore it, and the other was to directly crush the other party like crushing a bug. There was no doubt that Valeni couldn't die yet. He still had a lot of value to him. "I'm done." Valeni squatted on the ground, panting. His skinny chest was constantly moving up and down. He was filled with a strong sense of frustration. "Very good. If you're done, then let's go to the next stage and talk about resolving the misunderstanding and working together again. I've encountered quite a bit of trouble right now, and I need your help." Zhang Cheng never liked to talk too much nonsense, so he went straight to the point and explained his intentions. He knew very well that this guy in front of him, who had degenerated to the point of almost becoming savage, had persisted until now and didn't commit suicide. Naturally, he had an incomparable desire to live. Since he wanted to live, he naturally had weaknesses that could be used as bargaining chips. As for what to do after using him, he would slowly think about it later. The most important thing now was to complete the Trinity experiment and ensure that the organization wouldn't fail in this critical war. As long as he could achieve his goal, it didn't matter even if he had to join forces with his former enemy. What's more, was Valeni qualified to be Zhang Cheng's enemy? He couldn't even kill a mere clone, let alone threaten a powerful life form after fusion. Chapter 1025. A powerless weakling is a pathetic thing. Whether it was the most primitive and cruel slavery or the so-called civilized society of modern humans, the vast majority of the weak had no power to fight against the upper rulers except for playing the role of means of production. Obviously, in the comparison of power between the two, Valeni was the tool that could be abandoned at any time and picked up when needed. In Zhang Cheng's increasingly extreme concept, other than himself, other life forms were not worthy of being his kind. Therefore, his attitude towards Valeni was like treating a useful but disobedient dog. His eyes revealed naked contempt and ridicule. Do you want to live? Do you want to live like a real person and get rid of the miserable life that is worse than a wild dog? Then lie on the ground obediently and bark a few times, wagging your tail. That's right. This was the attitude that Zhang Cheng showed at this moment. He was not worried at all that this guy in front of him would choose to commit suicide. Because if a person really had the courage to commit suicide, how could he endure unimaginable torture and struggle to live until now? What do you want to do? Valeni suppressed the anger that was about to explode deep in his heart and asked with gritted teeth. It's very simple. I need your ability. Of course, I'm not talking about your half-baked ability now, but your ability after strengthening. Fate and foresight aren't actually your true abilities. Your real power lies in feeling the resonance of the string, and through the resonance, you can perceive the truth of this universe beyond time and space. To put it in simpler terms, your perception of the energy of the universe is far beyond that of ordinary people. Zhang Cheng explained calmly. The power of fate? What a ridiculous name. Is there really fate in the world? No. It was just that the level of civilization on Earth was too low to understand what string was. It was like an advanced technological creation in front of the backward ancient people. They would mistakenly think that it was some kind of incredible treasure, and they might even associate it with magic, witchcraft, or other supernatural forces. What do you mean? Valeni frowned subconsciously. One had to know that there was no concept of time in the high-dimensional universe. Since the last time the two of them parted, less than 3 years had passed in the Song of Ice and Fire world. However, in these short 3 years, he had a feeling that he couldn't see through this man who was emitting a strange aura from head to toe. He couldn't even sense the trajectory of the other party's fate. Misty, void, a strong sense of mystery. Valeni couldn't understand what had happened to him that caused such an unbelievable change. Zhang Cheng shook his head with a smile. No, nothing. I'm just feeling a little emotional about how ridiculous my perception of power was back then. I actually thought that you had the ability to peek into the past and the future. But I can't deny that your power is indeed very rare and can help me complete that crazy experiment. What about me? What do I get out of this? How can you guarantee that you won't kick me away again after you've used me? Valeni sneered. Even the monkey, who had suffered once, would remember the lesson, let alone him, who had been treated like an idiot and lived a life that was neither human nor ghost. Ha ha! Do you think you have the right to negotiate? No, my dear friend, you don't. Promise? Vow. Do you really think that I'll be bound by these boring rules? Don't be naive. You should know very well that I am a monster with no morals, no humanity, and no so-called bottom line. I am a madman who would rather destroy the world to satisfy my own greed and desires. Zhang Cheng laughed loudly, not hiding the fact that his evil soul was so dark that it was almost purple. Hearing this, Valeni's face turned ugly. What was the cruelest and most terrifying thing in the world? Naturally, it was when he had just obtained hope, only to have it extinguished with his own hands. What could he do in the face of a person who was many times stronger than him and could tear up the contract at any time? Resist? Sorry, that was no different from suicide. He might even suffer torture worse than death. Obey. Who knew if the other party would set up another trap like this after using him? To be honest, the years of running had almost worn out all of Valeni's patience, perseverance, and perseverance. He would rather die immediately than endure such a painful life. Just as this poor guy's mind was filled with conflicting thoughts, Zhang Cheng snapped his fingers and suggested, "How about this? As long as you do your best to help me complete the experiment, I can help you improve your life essence and step into the ranks of immortality. How about it? Isn't this a good idea?" Immortality. Valenti's pupils suddenly contracted. Yes, you have great power and almost eternal life. You can find a planet in the vast universe and create your own kingdom with your own hands, just like the Creator God. Zhang Cheng said in a meaningful way. If you wanted someone to work hard, you naturally had to give them some benefits. Otherwise, Empty slogans and ideals might work in a short period of time, but people weren't fools. There would be a day when they would wake up. As a lunatic who liked to play with people's hearts, he naturally wanted to maximize the other party's enthusiasm and strive to get the results he wanted before the war broke out. Why should I believe you? Voleny became a little excited, revealing undisguised fanaticism in his eyes. Zhang Cheng directly took out the Titan core that he had dug out from the mother's chest. Do you see it? Do you feel the powerful energy it contains? It's now yours. This is... Voleny took the core that was shining with a dazzling light and immediately activated his ability. He was so excited that he almost couldn't speak when he clearly saw its real function. Ah, you guessed right. This is the most important part of the body of the woman who called herself the Creator. As long as you fuse with it, you will have the same power as her. How about it? Can you believe me now? Zhang Cheng slightly raised the corner of his mouth, and a trace of imperceptible playfulness flashed across his face. There was no need to ask to know that he was using the advantage of asymmetric information to play and deceive Voleny. The Titan core was undoubtedly a good thing. Even if it was only used as a source of energy, it was enough to transform a barren planet into a special planet suitable for all kinds of magical creatures to live on. However, it was not an easy task to devour it with his fragile body. At the very least, before he could find a way to deal with it, this thing was only for show and not to be used. Chapter 1026. Obviously, for Voleny, there was no such thing as a choice. The only thing he could do was to choose between death and submission. As an ordinary person who had neither strong willpower nor strong ambition, he just wanted to live a good life and enjoy all kinds of good wine, food, beautiful women, and other things that made him happy. Therefore, after a brief struggle, he followed Zhang Cheng's clone and boarded the spaceship, directly disappearing at the end of the vast and boundless universe. After passing through the barrier that ordinary aircraft could never reach in their lifetime, Voleny finally boarded the mothership that was as large as dozens of planets combined. He saw a scene that he never dared to imagine in his life. But before he could recover from the shock, he suddenly heard a familiar voice in his ear. "Long time no see, my dear friend. How is it? Are you satisfied with this place?" It's you." Voleny turned around abruptly and stared at the giant standing in front of him with vigilant eyes. "That's right. Who else could it be other than me?" With that said, Zhang Cheng stretched out his right arm that shone with a metallic luster, crushed the clone's head, and threw it into outer space. Completely different from his previous image, he had completely abandoned human characteristics and was completely a powerful cosmic creature. His two eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance like stars. Abandon the past. Embrace the future. After understanding the true meaning of the mystery of the universe, Zhang Cheng had completely let go of himself and even no longer retained the unique habits and aesthetics of human beings. To some extent, he was indeed like what was described in the prophecy, a monster and madman who longed to transcend everything. Warrant felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the clone's body quickly freeze into a block of ice in the cold universe. One had to know that not everyone had the courage to kill themselves, even if it was just a body that was cloned to carry their own consciousness. Fortunately, his fear didn't last long. He was interrupted by a female adjutant with long blonde hair and a perfect figure. "Sir Commander, the latest news just came from the battlefield. We activated our secret weapon, the Light of Creation, and severely damaged the enemy's fleet. They won't be able to launch an attack for at least 2 weeks." The female adjutant gave a beautiful military salute and reported expressionlessly. "Light of Creation?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. This was because he had seen a detailed introduction of this weapon in the organization's database. He knew how terrifying its destructive power was, but he didn't expect it to be used on the battlefield so early. The Light of Creation, as its name suggested, was to recreate the entire universe. Once activated, it would crush all celestial bodies and warships within dozens of light years, turning them into high-speed photons. Of course, like all superweapons, it also had a fatal flaw. After using it once, it needed a long period of maintenance. The core components might even need to be remade. Normally speaking, such a strategic trump card should not be revealed unless it was a critical moment. But for some reason, the initiators chose to use the light of creation while they were still testing each other. Was it a moment of impulse? Or was he hiding some ulterior motive? Yes, sir. In addition, the fortress also asked you to carry out a saturation attack on the enemy's side within 48 hours to ensure that their remaining forces are eliminated and to prepare for the next phase of the battle. The female adjutant raised her sharp chin and responded with a serious face. Okay, I got it. Since it's an order from the fortress, immediately arrange it and carry out the saturation attack according to the plan. After that, Zhang Cheng waved his hand impatiently, indicating that she could leave. He never wasted too much time and energy on these soldiers and officers cloned through genetic technology. The reason was simple. They were all disposable cannon fodder. Often, more than half of them would be killed in one battle. After 2 or 3 battles, they would all be replaced with new faces. It was not worth wasting time on. However, Warrant, who had lived alone in the wilderness for a long time, was dazzled by the beautiful scenery around him. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, and his eyes glinted like a hungry wolf as he muttered to himself, "Oh my God, this is a man's paradise. Why are you interested in them?" Zhang Cheng asked softly with a slight smile. Of course, I'm not you. I've abandoned the most primitive human desires. It's the opposite. I enjoy the pleasure of immersing myself in these desires. If one day these desires don't exist, then what's the point of living? Voleni didn't hide his interest in this aspect and openly admitted it. Ha! Don't be so excited. I'm not looking down on or mocking you. On the contrary, if you are interested in them, I can give you some convenience. I allow you to have a relationship with any woman on this mothership, and none of them can refuse. Zhang Cheng made a proposal that was enough to make most men's blood boil. Voleni, who had always been very lecherous, couldn't refuse this. He immediately widened his eyes and asked, "Really? Are you sure?" Zhang Cheng nodded lightly. "Yes, I'm very sure. Here, this is the smart chip that symbolizes my identity as the commander. As long as you show it in front of anyone, you can ask the other party to satisfy all your needs, including the physiological aspects. Enjoy it. I'll give you 24 hours. After 24 hours, you must appear in the research room at the lowest level of the mothership." Hee. As you wish. Voleni took it without hesitation and went straight to the female adjutant. After a brief exchange, the two of them entered a lounge and began an earth-shattering melee battle. In fact, these clone officers and soldiers were embedded with coded biological computer controllers in their brains, so they couldn't refuse any orders given by their superiors. Even if they resisted, the controller would regulate the secretion of various pheromones in their brains so that they couldn't control their bodies and actively cooperate with the orders given by their superiors. After all, from the moment they were born, their mission was to satisfy the commander's strange interests, especially the young and beautiful female adjutant in the mothership. They were originally designed to satisfy some of the special desires of men. Now, Zhang Cheng just restored their original function and took the opportunity to increase Voleni's enthusiasm. In any case, only when people were in a good mood would their work efficiency be greatly improved. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 10:27. 24 hours wasn't short, but it wasn't long either, especially for an adult male who was drowned in a sea of high-quality beauties. It was simply a heavenly life, so it passed in the blink of an eye. When Voleni dragged his sore waist and trembled to the bottom of the mothership, Zhang Cheng had been standing there for a long time. He pointed at the dark planet floating in the air and directly ordered, "Go. Use your energy to feel its power and what will happen in the future." "What is this thing?" Voleni instinctively raised his vigilance and stared at the ball not far away that was emitting unusual energy waves. As a special ability user with an abnormally strong sense of danger, he instinctively felt that the dark planet that was compressed to the extreme was very terrifying. It was so terrifying that if there was the slightest accident, he would die without a burial place. Don't worry, it's now in a stable state and won't pose a threat to anyone. Zhang Cheng didn't explain too much and just comforted him. To be precise, he didn't want the other party to pry into too many secrets about the Trinity Project. Okay, I hope so. As Valeni spoke, he carefully extended a finger and touched the dark planet that was shining with a strange light. Instantly, endless light exploded in the depths of his soul, and his whole body couldn't help but twitch. When the light gradually dissipated, he saw a huge figure standing in the black universe, a creature that was far beyond his imagination. He didn't know how much time had passed, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours. When Valeni's pupils refocused again, he finally exhaled and said with a trembling voice, "I saw it in your body, in your chest. You turn it into your heart." Oh, a strange light flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes. As everyone knew, the essence of a Titan was the astral soul, a mysterious substance that was between energy and matter. So far, nothing had been found that could destroy it. However, astral souls did not possess overly powerful destructive powers. Therefore, the Titans still needed a body that could accommodate astral souls, a weapon that could destroy a planet with a raise of its hand. Generally speaking, this body was formed from a special metal extracted from the core of the planet after the awakening of the astral soul. The core of the body was equivalent to the core of the planet. In other words, when the Titan had a body, the core inside the Titan's body was equivalent to its energy source and heart. If it was destroyed or replaced, the Titan's body would crumble and lose control. In the end, it would lead to the terrifying death of the physical body and return to the astral soul form. Zhang Cheng didn't dare to imagine how disastrous the consequences would be if he replaced his core with a dark planet. The difficulty was no less than digging out an animal's heart and replacing it with a human's. What? You don't believe me? Valeni pursed his lips and sneered. No, it's just that I haven't figured out some key issues yet. Why don't you take a look at this one for me? Zhang Cheng pointed at the Abyssal Lord that was half transformed into a hero. No problem. You're the boss anyway. Valeni shrugged and didn't argue. He walked up to the Abyssal Lord and felt the mysterious power entangled in its body. After about a minute or two, he frowned and explained, "Sorry, I only saw endless darkness and a sad soul wailing in pain." You mean, his soul hasn't been destroyed, but is imprisoned somewhere? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with an imperceptible light. According to the results of his inspection, the Abyssal Lord's soul was no longer in the body. It was most likely crushed alive at the final stage of the experiment. But now, someone could actually sense that this guy's soul was wailing in pain somewhere. Valeni nodded directly. Yes, that's an extremely special place. It's surrounded by a powerful force field and light. No matter or energy can get close. Very good. This is very useful information. I'm going to leave for a while. You can stay on a mothership and enjoy your blissful life. After that, Zhang Cheng didn't stay for even a second. He turned around and left, entering the huge light pillar of the main string alone. There was no need to ask. The scene that Valeni described was most likely in a special area inside the main string, a secret place that had never been discovered by the members of the organization. As long as he found this place, he would be able to unravel some of the mysteries that had yet to be unraveled and grasp the true meaning of string power. However, Zhang Cheng obviously didn't expect that not long after he left, Valeni would secretly use his authority to sneak into the main control room and use his power to explore everything that had happened here. Then, he learned how to control these unimaginably advanced instruments and browse through the data at an extremely fast speed. After about 20 hours, he took a deep breath and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Unbelievable. High-dimensional universe? String? War? Organization? I'm actually just one of the countless failed products of the organization." While he was in a daze, the succubus Queen Wren appeared in the corner of the main control room. She licked her lips and revealed a dangerous smile. There was no doubt that as a pair of old enemies, they both wanted to get rid of each other once and for all. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. Without any hesitation, Rin directly activated her ability to change her appearance and disguise herself as a blonde beauty with an explosive figure. She walked gracefully to Valeni's side and greeted him with a voice that was sweet enough to kill. "Hello, Your Excellency. Is there anything I can help you with?" "You are." Valeni suddenly turned around, his eyes full of vigilance. However, after seeing the uniform and sexy figure of the succubus queen, he immediately relaxed and replied with a smile, "Of course. My dear, I need your help. Come, follow me. It's best if we find a quiet place and properly discuss the meaning of the word help." "As you wish." Rin bent down and bowed, taking the opportunity to show off her unfathomable cleavage. Then, the two of them walked into the nearest lounge and locked the door from the inside. After a while, there was a slight sound of collision from inside. No one knew what happened inside. They only knew that when Rin walked out, her entire body was emitting a pheromone that made men intoxicated. As for Valeni, he didn't even take half a step out of the room for the whole day.